like passive, he's got nothing to say. We need to really up the game here a little, honey. The grassroots, all of you are the ticket to make this happen. I will tell you this very quickly. We live in Loudoun County, and it is the parents of Loudoun County, Virginia, that got Governor Youngkin elected. And I need to do a shout out to my colleague at America First Legal, Ian Pryor, because he helped fight this fight and be a leader. So it is the grassroots, it is the parents of America, the grandparents of America, the young people of America who need to stand up and fight the fight, and we thank you and we love you.
Last word. I hear the music. Thank each and every one of you for being here, for being activists, for being patriots. God bless you all.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 되어야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
요즘 건물 사야 된다던데? 커머셜 전문 브로커 누가 좋지?
안드라스 부동산이지. 미국 모든 주에서 매매가 가능하다고. 쇼핑몰, 리테일, 오피스 빌딩, 호텔, 웨어하우스.
누구라고?
유튜브에 안드라스 윤 쳐봐.
이제는 철저히 준비된 전문성만이 수익성을 창출하는 시대입니다. 저 안드라스, 투자에 대한 답을 드리겠습니다.
안드라스커머셜닷컴에 더 많은 정보가 있습니다. 안드라스 부동산 770-802-0688.
탈모 샴푸. 머릿결은 포기해야 되나?
더나 플러스 모르나?
66가지 자연 유래 성분과 영양 성분으로 힘있는 모발에 세정력, 머릿결, 두피 건강까지 빠짐없이 다 잡았다. 자연을 담은 탈모 샴푸 더나 플러스.
더나 플러스 탈모 샴푸 미주 출시 기념 특별 세일. 500ml 샴푸 2통과 앰플까지 89불. 가까운 판매처에서 만나세요.
잊지마! 공석 탈모엔 더 나나나.
Wesley Hunt. From Ohio, Attorney General Dave Yost. And your moderator, host of Eric Bowling the Balance on Newsmax, Eric Bowling.
Hey, thank y'all. Appreciate it. You guys. How are you? How's everyone? Hey, Dave, how are you? Welcome to Cpac. We'll get right into it right away because these are three of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life, especially that one right over. We got a great topic, border security. And we were just chatting, what haven't you heard about the border? And this is something that I talked to Stephen about. It's very, very concerning to me. We know we have the Swiss cheese border. We know it's a problem. We know there are anywhere between 12 and 20 million illegals in the country already. And Stephen said, where are we going to start? And I'll start with you, Stephen. The concern is the Swiss cheese border. Now municipalities around the country are talking about allowing illegals the right to vote. Dangerous.
Well, I think this is the next great threat to our sovereignty, buried within this border nightmare we've been living through for 2 years. And everyone in this room, of course, is familiar, as Eric said, with the fact that we're probably now well over 20 million illegal aliens in this country. And who really even knows how many have come in the last 2 years? I could cite you the numbers about border statistics, but how many millions more have gone in completely unknown, undetected? And so now you see leftists moving to let illegal aliens vote. So in Washington, D.C., as I think you all know, they passed a law saying illegal aliens can vote in our nation's capital city. So they can pass laws using illegal aliens that will determine the crime, the public safety, the education policy in our nation's capital. And Joe Biden has said that he will not veto the House's effort to stop that law. So that's going to go into effect unless something miraculous happens. And my fear and my prediction is that you're going to see one municipality after another in this country realize the extraordinary political power the left can seize by letting illegal aliens and non-citizens vote in city after city after city, creating a massive political constituency comprised entirely of illegal aliens. And we need a complete federal ban on non-citizens voting in all elections.
Amen. Absolutely. Congressman, your thoughts on that topic?
You know, I view this as more of an issue of national security. I'm a West Point guy. I'm a military guy, and we have seen enough fentanyl pour into our borders to kill every single American 5 times. That's astounding to me. We've lost 150,000 Americans in the last 2 years since Joe Biden has been our president. That's astounding to me. Americans are dying every single day because we have a porous border and because China is supplying the cartels with fentanyl, and we've lost enough Americans that would account for 3 times the number of soldiers that we lost during the Vietnam War. I'm going to tell y'all, we're already at war with the cartels and with China, by the way. They know exactly what they're doing. Thank you. They know exactly what we're doing, and as somebody that's down in Texas that sees this every single day, my concern is watching the border czar and this current president do absolutely nothing about it while this drug indiscriminately kills Americans. We've seen 50 people on the terrorist watch list that we know of enter our country. Now, I was at West Point when 9/11 hit. I remember it well. I devoted my life to serve this country to stop that from happening again. Thank you. And here we are back at square one. So I really appreciate the voices in this room right now and the people on this panel that understand that this is an issue of our sovereignty. It's the federal government's job to keep her citizens safe, and that's what I intend to do in the future here as a member of the United States Congress.
I don't know if you know this, I lost my only child, my son, to a fentanyl overdose in college. Sophomore.
I am sorry to hear that.
Long story, I think most of you, this is my 7th speech or appearance at Cpac, and we've done this in the past, but thank you for your concern about the fentanyl crisis that is existentially a threat to our younger people especially. Attorney General, tell us, I want to continue on with the idea that once we allow illegals the right to vote, it's game over for conservatives in this country, is it not?
The thing is, illegals shouldn't be in the country. And so why are we even talking about voting? You know, Ohio was part of a coalition of states that challenged the Biden administration. This was so outrageous. In 2021, the Department of Homeland Security issued a guidance that basically repealed an act of Congress that required anybody that had gotten a final order to be deported within 90 days. And they just said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're talking about convicted felons in many cases. I don't know how we can expect foreigners to obey the law when the President of the United States doesn't obey the law.
Indeed, indeed. Stephen, how many would love to see the wall that the Trump administration started completed? Is a wall racist, Stephen? Is a wall racist?
The wall is the opposite of racist. You look at these border communities living in Texas who have screamed and shouted, begged and pleaded for some kind of border security. Who's living in these communities? Overwhelmingly, these are Hispanic Americans, Latinos, first, second, third generation, some quite a bit longer, who are living in these communities, who are having their hospitals destroyed, their schools destroyed, their public infrastructure destroyed. And of course, they're not safe in their own cities, because you mentioned it's a cartel war happening on our border. It is. And every American citizen, this is something I talk about all the time, every American citizen has a civil right to be secure and safe in their own country and to have a completely sealed border. It is a violation of the civil rights of every single American that you have millions of illegal immigrants coming to this country, competing for your jobs, your health care, your public benefits, spots in your kids' local school, crowding the emergency rooms, and then on top of all of that, committing heinous crimes as we see time and time and time again. The most important thing that we can do in the next 2 years is support people like the congressman right here as they fight in the House of Representatives to shut down the border and stop this incredible violation of our sovereignty.
Yeah, and Congressman, let me just expand on that a little bit. As a television host, if you say that illegals come across the border and commit crimes at a higher rate, you are now racist and attempted to be canceled. But Congressman, it's actually true, isn't it?
I love to piggyback on that. I was actually in a judiciary hearing the other day, and a man from the left came to testify, and he said that if you call what's happening at our border an invasion, then you're racist. And I've been black for a long time. And I consider what's happening at our border an invasion, and I can assure you that I am not racist. But the left always behaves this way, that they have now become the boy who cried wolf, and everything that they talk about and everything that they do is racist. And what's funny about this conversation is the most racist thing that I have seen over the course of the past few years is the insinuation that black and brown people can't have an ID or can't get an ID to go vote. Voting in this country is actually very easy. It's a very low bar. And the reason why I call them racist is because they think so little of a group of people that attaining an ID or being a citizen of this country to vote for our leadership for the future is in some way impossible for black and brown people to be able to do. Now that's why I am a conservative, because I don't prescribe to the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Well done, well done. Attorney General, where are we as a country, or as a state, as a country, in increasing our voting security by requiring an identification? Is it that much? Is it that hard, as Congressman West says?
Well, look, 80% of the people in America think that if you have to have an ID to buy beer or rent a car, it's not a stretch to say that you ought to have an ID for voting. Ohio just passed a law. You know what happened as soon as we passed the law? Common sense law requiring common sense security, including voter ID. Mark Elias sued us. And you know what? We're going to fight him, and we're going to win that case.
Stephen, how many forms of ID do you need to show to get into the White House?
I mean,
by the way,
you have to tell your whole life story and have your.
It's a Democrat Biden White House right now. I'm sure they didn't relax the entrance requirements.
By the time that a member of the public is admitted into the White House, they pretty much verified your entire biography, that of your family and everyone that you've met in your life. The fact that we don't ask people for an ID to vote in this country is criminal. We have no idea who's voting in this country. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. We do not have any method for verifying your identity for people who are voting in federal elections in almost all states because of an activist judiciary and activist lawsuits. In state after state after state of this country, we vote on the honor system. I want you to think about that. You show up and you say, this is my name and I'm a citizen, and they say, well, if you say so, then by all means, here's your vote. Here's your absentee ballot. Here's whatever you want. There's no verification whatsoever that you, in fact, live where you say you live, are who you say you are, or were a citizen of this country at the time that you voted. That's insane, and has to be a top priority for conservatives everywhere to have true integrity in our elections.
Now, Congressman, I know the communist country of California allows illegals to get driver's license. If someone illegal presents at a voting booth, they'll be allowed to by showing a driver's license?
We absolutely have to fix that, but Gavin Newsom, we know how he is, so my guess is he won't do anything about it. No. But to talk about just even how low this bar is, I have an 8-week little boy at my house right now, 8 weeks old. Thank you. Cute little guy. I love him to death. Do you know what he has already?
An ID.
A Social Security card.
Yes, right? Yeah.
It got mailed to my house.
Yeah.
That's how easy it is to get an ID in this country. And the only thing that the people in this room want, the only thing that we want, is for somebody to walk in and say, hey, I want to vote for this person, and here's my Social Security card, or here's my CHL. I'm from Texas, so I have my CHL, I have a driver's license, I have my congressman ID. I have like 10 forms of ID currently in my wallet as we speak. And the reason why we have these things is because that's just what responsible adults and Americans do. Why would we want irresponsible adults and Americans that can't meet that threshold to vote in our elections? It's pretty ridiculous. So what this panel, what we're trying to talk about here is personal responsibility and how do we as a country have free and fair elections when we know exactly who is voting in every single election, and also for you so that you know that your vote counted. That's the most important thing that we can have in this country. It's imperative for our democracy to keep that.
Attorney General, do you think a certain percentage of the total vote is delivered by illegals in America?
You know, this is interesting because there's all these studies that get thrown out by the left all the time that, you know, a tiny percentage, you know, well to the right of the decimal point. But I was a prosecutor, and one of the first things that they teach you as a prosecutor is the first element you have to determine is the identity of the person that committed the crime. You've all seen this on TV, right? Yeah, they asked the witness, do you see the man that assaulted you in the courtroom? That's him, right? That's the identity. How are you going to be able to tell the answer to your question if you don't have ID?
Stephen,
it's a serious question, folks.
You said yourself, you can't buy a six-pack of beer without an ID. You can't get into Cpac, can't get into the White House.
Can't rent a car either.
Can't rent a car, but you can make one of the most important decisions in this country without an ID.
You also can't check into a hotel anymore without an ID.
Yeah. So how do we fix it? Let's do. We have a couple minutes for each. What's the solution? Is it unfixable or is it fixable still?
So, I mean, the solution is a few things. One, on this ID point, just to reiterate, we need to have a national drive as conservatives, and we have to ask the same of all of our politicians in state, local, and federal office to say that in every election, in every part of this country, there is going to be an ID requirement. And if judges are blocking it, then we need to have a national drive to get a judiciary, both at the state and federal level, because a lot of the stuff's also at the state level, that is going to uphold voter ID so that we can reclaim the integrity of our elections. And then in the meantime, to seal the border, the most important thing that we're going to do is there's going to be an appropriations fight coming up at the end of this fiscal year, around September. And we're going to need 218 rock-ribbed members of Congress, just like Congressman Hunt, that are going to say, we're not going to fund the Department of Homeland Security absent a complete requirement that every illegal alien who crosses that border gets shipped back where they came from. And that's it. And we're not taking it anymore.
Congressman.
I think it's up to us in this room to start to change the narrative of what it means to have an ID to be able to vote. Again, the left calls everyone racist, and in my house, growing up for me, it was an issue of personal responsibility. I'm a West Point grad, my brother's a West Point grad, my sister's a West Point grad.
Thank you for our freedom.
There's 60 years worth of military service just in my immediate family, and why do I tell you that? Because my father and my mother would look at me like I was crazy if I told them that I couldn't get an ID to vote. That needs to be our message to the left. It's not about being racist. It's not about anything else outside of what do you want to see in terms of voter integrity and having an ID to go vote, and don't let them call you anything else. You make sure that you hold their feet to the fire and you say, it's not about race. We're all Americans here. I just want to know my vote counted, and I can assure you all I will fight for you tirelessly in the halls of Congress to make sure that your vote counts.
Good for you. Attorney General, fixable?
So these guys have already spoken to this. Let's zoom out to the first principle, which is that the president has to obey the law. Whether we're talking about the eviction moratorium or the vaccine mandate from OSHA or the overstep of the EPA over and over and over again, or what we're seeing out of Homeland Security, and on, I could tell you about 1 million, it seems like, lawsuits that are out there. The key is to hold the president responsible, to restrain executive power, to honor Congress, our legislative authority. And you know what the Attorney General can do about it? Same thing as when anybody breaks the law. We take them to court.
Good for you. Good for you. Stephen, only about 2 minutes left. I love this idea. You may not love this idea. Big fence, wide gate. Why don't we put the fence up, stop the illegal immigration, but increase our legal immigration, make it easier to come to the country? I know. I'm a libertarian, sorry. But let's be honest, folks. The economy needs people. We need immigration to thrive, do we not?
Well, I got the room on my side. I haven't even started talking yet. We need to have me on your show, and we can do like a good 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, so you need more time than that.
But my very short
the legal
answer
immigration number is about 1 million a year, right?
But here's my very short answer.
Yeah.
And I'll take advantage of the fact that you don't have time for a rebuttal. My view.
Wait, before you answer that, I'm pretty sure there was a guy named Donald John Trump who liked big wall with wide gate also? No?
So what I will tell you is that my view is that, and I believe this was also could be described as the policy of the Trump administration, is that when you have massive numbers of people who are out of the labor force, record numbers of people, whether they be on welfare, whether they've just given up looking for work, but they're completely detached from the labor force, we need to have what I would call a timeout or a pause, a breather, a break, so that we can get our own people fully absorbed back into the workforce and into our civic life and into our democracy.
Let's get Congressman a quick thought.
We've had, in the last 2 years, we've had 5.5 million people that we know of enter our country illegally. My dad always taught me, you cannot put the cart in front of the horse. We cannot even begin to have this conversation until we fix our porous border. As a congressman, I don't want to hear about amnesty. I don't want to hear about immunity. I don't want to hear anything until we talk about how we're going to fix what's happening at our border every single day.
Quick thought before we go. We're running it. We're down.
What he said.
What he said. All right, folks. Thank you so much. Great panel. Great discussion. We have some ideas. Stephen will be on the show. Well, maybe next week. We'll talk. And by the way, while I have you, 10 seconds. DirecTV. They deplatforms Newsmax. Give them a call. Tell them you got to put Newsmax back on. Appreciate your time. Love Cpac. Good. And Matt Schlapp and Mercy. Thank you both so much as well. Great guys. Terrific.
Thank you very much. Hey.
Well done.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, all Cpac ticket purchasers have until 3 p.m. today to vote in the Cpac straw poll. Please download the Cpac app and use the code on your badge to cast your vote. The poll closes at 3 p.m. ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from North Carolina, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson.
Thank y'all so much. We appreciate it. It's good to be back at Cpac again. But as always, the very first thing we're going to do, we're going to give thanks to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Right off the bat, as always. Why? Because he is worthy. He's the reason why we live in this blessed and prosperous land. And in him, that's where you find true freedom. So we give him thanks first and foremost. That being said, I also need to say this. We've heard a lot of things today, and we've been hearing a lot of things about the bad news in this country, but I want to give you some good news today. The very first piece of good news I want to give you is that God is still on the throne, and God is still in control, even in this nation. Even though Joe Biden may be the president of the United States of America, God is still in control, and he will always be in control. And it is time as Americans that we start standing up and giving him some thanks. What do we need to thank him for? There are a whole lot of things we need to thank him for. Even in the bad things that we are facing, there are things that we need to thank him mightily for. We need to thank him for those brave men and women in green down on the border, that despite not having the support of the federal government and the Biden administration, they still get up every day, put that uniform on, get on those horses, get in those trucks, and patrol that border for our border security. They continue to do it day in and day out, even though their bosses in Washington refuse to give them what they need in order to succeed. But those brave men and women, they still get up and do it every day. We need to give thanks to them. We need to give thanks to the men and women in uniform who patrol our streets for public safety. They've got everybody from ABC, CNN, BLM, and Antifa calling to have the police defunded, lying on the police, saying that our policemen are racist, saying that our policemen are violent, saying that they need to be defunded. But every day, those men and women get up, they put on that uniform, and they go out into those neighborhoods and they patrol those streets for public safety and lay down their lives for the people that they love and for the cities they love and for the nation that they love. We need to give thanks for those men and women. We need to give thanks for those brave mothers and fathers who would be called domestic terrorists by having the unmitigated gall to go down and speak up at the school board meeting for their children because they refuse to have their children indoctrinated by CRT and have them presented with pornography. And they're willing to stand up and face the federal government if necessary. We need to give thanks for those teachers that are in those classrooms every day pushing back against those agendas and fighting to do what's right for our students. We need to say thank you for our military, that despite the fact that they want them to be woke, they are still willing to stand up and serve and fight for the nation that they love. We need to give thanks for those folks. Now, why do I say all that? I say that to say this. Some of that needs to translate to those folks in Washington, D.C. Some of that needs to translate to those folks in your state capital. Some of it needs to translate to the folks on our city councils and our county commissions, because there exists a problem in politics today. You see, back home in North Carolina, one of the most poorly kept secrets is that a guy named Mark Robinson may run for governor. And I got all kind of people that want me to do that. And I got all kind of people that don't want me to do it and want to stand up and try to stop me. But here it is. I know one thing, that God, like I said, is in control. And what he has for me, no man can stop. And I'm not saying that I'm ordained to be the governor. But if it's his will for me to be, it will be. And no one can stop it. But I don't know if that's his will or not. But I can tell you this. Somebody asked me not too long ago, they said, why do you want to be the governor? And I looked at him and I told him what I believed in. But I never answered the question. But I got in my car on the way home and I thought about it and I said, well, why do I want to be governor? Then I thought about it real deep and I came to a conclusion. I don't want to be the governor. Then I thought about it even deeper and said, you know, I didn't even want to be lieutenant governor. Now I want you to think about what I just said. I said, I don't want to be the governor. You see, that is the problem in that statement. The problem in that statement is want. We have too many people who decide to run for office because they want to be something. They want to be a congressman. They want to be a senator. They want to be a governor. They want to be president. They want to be a big shot who pops his collar and looks down on the people, tells them what to do and has doors open for them. They have a title. They have armed guards. And they'll have a legacy, a political legacy of their fantastic political career that will follow them for life. They want. Let me tell you something about want. Want is not what is standing in front of you. When I say I don't want to be governor, this is how I describe it. I want you to go back in your mind. Go back to June the 6th, 1944. Go back to the English Channel. Find one of those Higgins boats. And in that Higgins boat, you'll find a young man probably from Bedford, Virginia, a member of the 116th Infantry, 29th Infantry, that is about to attack Omaha Beach. The toughest fight of that day would take place on that beach. Some 70 to 80% of his comrades would be killed. I want you to go back in your mind and I want you to ask that young man, why did you come here to this place? Why did you want to join the army and come here to this place? Why did you want to watch your friends be slaughtered? Why do you want these Germans shooting at you? Why do you want to leave your family and friends behind, possibly to never see them again? I would imagine that that young man would probably turn around and look at you and say something to the effect of, I didn't want any of this. Because this is not about want. This is about service. You see, my nation is in trouble. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and Hitler is murdering his way across Europe. I cannot sit at home and watch this world burn and have my nation in trouble. It's time for me to stand up and serve up to and including giving my life if necessary. This is not about want. It's about service. And the people in D.C. need to hear it. You're not there to serve yourself and your self-interest. You're there to serve the people of this nation and the state you represent, the area that you represent. Yes, up to and including your political life if necessary. You see, that's another thing we need to thank God for right now. We got some folks like Dan Bishop that'll go to Washington, D.C. and make sure that we fight to bring real leadership back to that entity. Because that's what it's time for, folks. It's time for our political class to understand why they are there. They're not there to get rich and reelected. They're not there to serve their own interest. They're not there to craft a political career that will follow them for the rest of their life and get them paid for the rest of their life. They are there to do what the founders intended it to be, service, to be service to the people that elected them to those positions. You see, because sometimes when you're doing the right thing, it gets tough out here on this old road. The media comes after you. Sometimes your own party comes after you, but you got to keep going. And why do you got to keep going? I don't know what your reason is, but I've got my reason. I've got what I call my core. My core is my grandbabies. See, because I got to build a future for them to make sure that they can live the life of freedom, the same kind of life of freedom that I lived. This morning I talked to them by phone. They were at their home. They were with their mom and dad, and they were doing science experiments. had on little white lab coats and glasses, and they said, we're doing science experiments. And I looked at them in those lab coats, and they said they were scientists, and I looked at them and I said, wow, they're already better scientists than Dr. Fauci is. But seriously, that's what I fight for every day, to leave them a legacy of freedom. I don't need a legacy of a political career. I need to leave a legacy of freedom for the people that I serve, and that's exactly what I intend to do. God bless you all. God bless the United States of America, and God bless the great state of North Carolina. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, all Cpac ticket purchasers
탈모
have until
샴푸
3 p.m.
머릿결은
today.
포기해야 되나?
더나 플러스 모르나?
66가지 자연 유래 성분과 영양 성분으로 힘 있는 모발의 세정력, 머릿결, 두피 건강까지 빠짐없이 다 잡았다. 자연을 담은 탈모 샴푸 더나 플러스.
더나 플러스 탈모 샴푸 미주 출시 기념 특별 세일. 500ml 샴푸 2통과 앰플까지 89불. 가까운 판매처에서 만나세요.
잊지마 공석 탈모엔 더 나나나.
요즘 건물 사야 된다던데? 커머셜 전문 브로커 누가 좋지?
안드라스 부동산이지. 미국 모든 주에서 매매가 가능하다고. 쇼핑몰, 리테일, 오피스 빌딩, 호텔, 웨어하우스.
누구라고?
유튜브에 안드라스 윤 쳐봐.
이제는 철저히 준비된 전문성만이 수익성을 창출하는 시대입니다. 저 안드레스, 투자에 대한 답을 드리겠습니다.
안드라스 커머셜.com에 더 많은 정보가 있습니다. 안드라스 부동산 770-802-0688.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 되어야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
Cpac.
Well, General Kellogg, we need to figure out if the U.S. military is ready for this very, very difficult time period. So what we're seeing is there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of focus of the U.S. military right now, even though it's not direct engagement on the Russia-Ukraine war. We've witnessed this, terrible withdrawal from Afghanistan. And of course, all the enemies of America were watching that. And at the same time, we've got communist China, the Chinese regime, saber rattling around Taiwan, with some people believing that it might be soon that they choose to invade. And is the U.S. military ready for this?
Yeah, well, thanks. First of all, it's kind of hard following the lieutenant governor after that talk he had. It was pretty good. When you look at the U.S. military, the very first thing I'd say to everybody out there is never discount, never bet against the United States of America. I never would. But at the same time, you're saying that the military does have some issues right now, primarily in the area of it being kind of woke and what is happening out there, and it's something that we do correct it on. But when you look at the opponents we are now facing, and there's really two, when you have to look at both in what's happening with Russia and you have to look at what's happening with China right now. Years ago, we had a two-war policy where we were always prepared to fight both in the East and the West. We'd fight in the Pacific, fight in at least European engagement against the Soviets in the Warsaw Pact. We've gone to 1.5 policy. So the concern I've got right now is, okay, we've consistently thought and looked at the Middle East, the terrorism. We kind of forgot that China was growing, and we forgot there was still a Russian threat. So we're kind of in a crossroads right now, and I think it's a crossroads not only of leadership, but also in the kind of ideology that we have. I've always been a big believer, Jan. You know, when I was a commander of a unit, I used to walk in the door and tell them every single day, remember, your job is to fight and don't forget it. Your job is to deter our nation's adversaries. And if deterrence fails, you fight and win our nation's wars. I'm not too sure that's the primacy of the military right now.
Well, let's jump to the Russia-Ukraine piece for a moment. You were actually there not 3 weeks ago, right, near the line of contact, as it's called, as I understand. And so, you know, and there's a ton of confusion, frankly, about what's going on over there because information war has become, you know, an increasingly large component of actually what's happening. So what is happening over there?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I just finished up a discussion with the Senate Armed Services Committee just earlier this week, and I know there's a lot of people out there very concerned about the amount of money that we're spending on supporting Ukraine out there. But, you know, I think you can chew bubblegum and walk at the same time. You know, the fact that we haven't really looked at our own borders is very concerning to me. And we've made some real mistakes here with the policy of this administration. Number one, nobody can tell me what the end state is in Ukraine. I'm still trying to figure it out because this administration hasn't talked about it at all. And what's going to take to do it, and President Biden didn't talk to the American people. But saying there, and I'm going to talk at a strategic level, when I was in the White House at the national security level talking with the president, I said, look, the best thing you can have in the military is fight one enemy at a time. Never fight two. You never want to have to do it. Sort of like we did in World War II, where we defeated the Germans, and then we eventually moved to the Pacific out there. And right now, we're providing a lot of equipment to Ukrainians. And when I was over in Ukraine and spent over 2 weeks there with them, the Ukrainians don't want any Americans. They don't want anybody there. They want the equipment to fight the Russians. And they've got the Russians on the back heels. And I think that's good, because I think we're taking a strategic adversary off the stage, and then you only have to focus on one enemy, which are the Chinese, an adversary. You know, I kind of think that's kind of the America First strategy of only going there. And when you look at what happened in this administration, you know, in their national security policy, they don't call anybody an adversary. They don't call the Russians an adversary. They don't call the Chinese an adversary. They call them competitors. Look, France is a competitor. China is an adversary, and we need to look at it. And until we can take the Russians off the stage, we can't focus on the Chinese. We're able to do this. And the Ukrainians are willing to do it. They're fighting exceptionally well. I was over there talked to a lot of the senior leaders out there, both civilian and military, but also of Americans. We have Americans fighting over there. They're called mercenaries. They actually have gone there voluntarily because they believe in what they're doing quite strongly. And we brought some of them out with us when we came out just a couple of weeks ago. But to put that pressure on the Russians is very, very important. And there's a way to do it. I mean, there is a solution to this. You know, first of all, everybody needs to understand, this war would have never happened under President Trump. I guarantee you that. Okay? You know, I was on 18 different phone calls with President Trump and Vladimir Putin, and I know exactly what the president used to say to him. And that war never started. The trouble is, it's sort of like in the military, it's called a river crossing. It's the most difficult mission you have in the military. You know, it's the near bank and far bank. You go from the near bank to the far bank. You don't get halfway into the river and say, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, come back. What you've got to do is you've got to fight through it. And we're in that position right now that we are actually engaged with the Russians as almost a proxy, and we need to let them finish that fight. There's no love lost at all between them. There's ways to do it. I think strategically you can do it. Get that enemy off there, then it totally changes Europe for a decade, maybe even a generation, and then we don't have to worry about the Russians, and we can back away a little bit from what we're putting into NATO, and we can put all that focus in right now on China, which we haven't been able to do.
Well, so how big an issue is the Chinese Communist Party for America ultimately? Because this is another question that keeps coming up.
I think it's huge. I mean, first of all, you know, you got to remember President Xi's in his third term right now is leading China. And in 2018, he went to his National Defense University, and he said that the West and the East, the two forms of government, are irreconcilable. They're not going to work together at all. And this is the same individual who sat in the Rose Garden with President Obama and said they were not going to fortify any of the islands in the South China Sea. Well, go look at the Spratly Islands or areas around that. They've all been fortified out there. And they want to push us away from what's called the first line of the first island chain. And that we're talking about from Japan, you come down to Taiwan, and you come into the Philippines. They're trying to push us out of that so they'll have the influence on the Pacific region that we fought so hard to gain after World War II. Look, I'll give you a good example of what's happened with China. You know, the Solomon Islands. Solomon Islands are where Guadalcanal is. That was the great Marine victory in World War II, where they fought nose to nose with the Japanese, pushed them off that island. Okay? Just about a couple of months ago, there was supposed to be a port call of a U.S. Coast Guard cutter into the Solomon Islands. And they were rejected because the Chinese said, don't let them come in. That's the influence the Chinese are trying to have. And we need to recognize that. And you saw what happened just recently with the balloon. I mean, if civilians had noticed that balloon, that thing would have floated across the United States of America, and everybody would have been looking the other way. And unfortunately, they said, well, it's just a weather balloon. That was not a weather balloon. That sensor package was the size of 3 school buses. And it was able to, it crossed over the most sensitive sites we have. It crossed over the 341st Missile Wing, which is the first wing, then went over the 90th and 91st wings. And by the way, those are the 3 wings that control the 400 ICBMs in the United States of America, 1/3 of the triad. Then as it made its journey, it passed by Reitman Air Force Base, and what's there? The B-2 bombers. That's the second leg of the triad. You know, it was just lucky it didn't go over Georgia where our third leg is. So the Chinese are very aggressive. We know they're aggressive, and they haven't been countered. I think the last administration of President Trump, we looked really hard at decoupling. And decoupling means we had to move away from having so much of our basically businesses in China are working from China. And it'll take us a few years to do it, but we need to decouple and move away from that. You know, the trade deficit every year is almost $350 billion. That's massive. We have funded the Chinese military, and we funded their government as well.
Yeah, and as far as I know, there's still money from some of our index funds that's going into Chinese military companies as we speak, which is absolutely astounding. So this is, I want to touch on this a little bit. You know, when we think of the military, we think of war, we think of conventional war, we think of, you know, a lot of what's, for example, happening on the ground in Russia, Ukraine. But a lot of what the Chinese Communist Party has done is what you call unconventional warfare, unrestricted warfare. You know, what is the impact of this balloon flying across America? Like what on this psychology? So a type of psychological warfare, this type of financial warfare that they were describing. They're actually using American funds to fund themselves. So, and there's been this concern that the US military isn't moving quickly enough to understand that a lot of the warfare happening today is war without having to fire a shot, but overcome the enemy in other ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, everybody has to understand that risk is a province of war. It's kind of the way it is. And frankly, this administration doesn't want to take on any risk at all. You know, I will tell you, and I say it very proudly of being with the Trump administration, is there's one thing President Trump did. He was willing to take a risk. Look what we did with Soleimani. You know, when he made the decision to take out Soleimani, there was a lot of people pushed back on him and said, you know, look, this is pretty hard, and in the end, that this could start as another Middle East war. And he was right when he said, you know, we have to take a little bit of risk, and we need to ensure that the Iranians knew what we were coming. In fact, just a quick short story on that was, when we took out Soleimani, we actually told the Supreme Leader, you're next. If something happened, you kill an American. And there's a little story that people don't remember about what happened after we took out Soleimani. And it happened 2 days after it. And what happened was the Iranians shot down a Ukrainian airliner, civilian airliner, coming out of Tehran because they thought it was us coming after the Supreme Leader. That's when you put strength in, and then you understand the risk involved with it. And the same thing is with China, and actually what's happening in Europe as well. And they have to understand you're going to have to push back against the Chinese. They're developing an incredible nuclear arsenal. They're putting silos in the western part of China right now. They're looking to put a missile field that'll be of equivalence to ours, 300 to 400 missiles. And in the military, they call that the sponge theory. And the sponge theory is the reason you put ground missiles there, it takes up all of your strike capability, and then that leaves them with a second strike capability. And we need to push back on the Chinese, and especially when it's coming to Taiwan. My concern with Taiwan is you're looking at a window of vulnerability for Taiwan in the next 2 years, because the Chinese are very astute. They're very smart, and if they want to reunify, which they've said they're going to do, if they want to reunify Taiwan, they're going to have to try to probably do it in the next 2 years, or they're going to lose it forever. And so that means we have to be aware of that and be prepared militarily to engage with them. It's a different war that's happening right now, which you see in Ukraine. It's primarily a ground war. The war in the Pacific will be predominantly an air and naval war, so it's dissimilar in a way. But I think we have to be prepared to engage. And I think there's a fear, and when we're seeing that also what's happening right now, what's happening in Ukraine, when you're facing a nuclear adversary, There's a fear of being able to respond to it because you don't know what the nuclear adversary is going to do. And that was always our concern, by the way, of Iran becoming a nuclear-capable nation, because once they get a nuclear missile, then what are you going to do? So, but you have to understand, it's sort of like going all in poker. You have to be willing to do it, and it takes strong leadership to do it. You know, it's what I was concerned about a couple of years ago. I was asked when I was on a show, they said, what keeps you awake at night? And they thought I was going to say Russia. They thought I was going to say China. They were going to say the Middle East. I said, what keeps me awake at night, this was after the election, is the lack of presidential decision-making. And I think it had been proven in spades that I was right when I was saying that. And the concern I've got is they don't have the adults in the room. And you're seeing that, and I don't care where you're at and what you're doing, but you look at the compilation, you can even look what's happening in the United States with our border. It's almost like they're whistling past the graveyard, hoping that nobody's going to pay attention to it, sort of like the balloon that just floated over the United States.
So, General Kellogg, as we finish up here, you know, there seems to be some time limits on these things, right? I mean, the Russia-Ukraine war can't go on for that much longer for it to be in Ukraine's favor, as far as I can tell. And similarly, you know, as you mentioned, China is looking at a 2-year window, and you know, you mentioned there might be an issue with leadership here. So what is the best way forward in these next 2 years?
Well, let me use Ukraine because the Russian threat is quite large there. And I've said this, and I said this again when I testified in front of the Senate just this last week. I said, look, if you can't let this thing go, this is an endless war if you let it go for another year or 2 years. And then you'll never be able to put it back in the box because the Ukrainians cannot fight an attrition war. They're outmanned 4-1. You look at the size of the Russian army, they're calling up 300,000 to 500,000 reserves. They've committed 90% of the Russian army is now committed in the field against them. And to me, if we can do everything we can, not providing U.S. troops, we're fighting to kill the Russian army, and I would give Putin a choice. And if I was the President of the United States, you pick up the phone, which President Biden has not done. You pick up the phone and call Putin and you say, you got an option. You know, we're going to negotiate. And because there's been no negotiations, and we should, you're going to lose your army in Ukraine, or you're going to take it home. One of the two. It's going to be your choice. And you have to approach it that way. And there's nothing wrong with taking a strategic adversary like the Russians off the stage, because then for the first time in 21 years, we can focus on the predominant threat facing the United States, and that's China.
Well, thanks a lot, General Kellogg. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today.
Thank you very much.
Give him a hand, everybody, please.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 되어야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
요즘 건물 사야 된다던데? 커머셜 전문 브로커 누가 좋지?
안드라스 부동산이지. 미국 모든 주에서 매매가 가능하다고. 쇼핑몰, 리테일, 오피스 빌딩, 호텔, 웨어하우스.
누구라고?
유튜브에 안드라스 윤 쳐봐.
이제는 철저히 준비된 전문성만이 수익성을 창출하는 시대입니다. 저 안드라스, 투자에 대한 답을 드리겠습니다.
안드라스커머셜닷컴에 더 많은 정보가 있습니다. 안드라스 부동산 770-802-0688.
탈모 샴푸. 머릿결은 포기해야 되나?
더나 플러스 모르나?
66가지 자연 유래 성분과 영양 성분으로 힘있는 모발에 세정력, 머릿결, 두피 건강까지 빠짐없이 다 잡았다. 자연을 담은 탈모 샴푸 더나 플러스.
더나 플러스 탈모 샴푸 미주 출시 기념 특별 세일. 500ml 샴푸 2통과 앰플까지 89불. 가까운 판매처에서 만나세요.
잊지마! 공석 탈모엔 더 나나나.
The world without oil energy. From there, you can bolster your oil knowledge by downloading one of our Oil and Gas primers. Oil and Gas 101, for 102. Mechanics, we believe is an error.
네, 여러분 다시 홍성구 기자 돌아왔습니다. 지금 이제 강연들이 계속 진행이 되고 있는 중인데 지금 이제 무대를 지금 변화를 주고 있는 과정이고요. 지금까지 프롬프터 없이 강연들이 있었는데 근데 지금 이제 프롬프터 설치를 하느라고 시간이 좀 걸려서 그 사이에 지금 저희가 여러 가지 말씀을 좀 드리려고 합니다. 좀 전에 들으셨던 거는 이제 켈로그 전 장군의 이야기였는데요. 켈로그 장군은 지금 현재는 미국 제일주의 정책연구소, 그러니까 이제 AFPI라고 하죠. 이 연구소에서 공동소장을 맡고 있고 이 연구소가 굉장히 많은 띵크탱크 역할을 지금 이제 마가 정치인들의 띵크탱크 역할을 해주고 있는 그런 조직입니다. 트럼프 행정부 때 전 행정부에서 일했던 분들이 만든 조직인데요. 굉장히 중요한 역할을 앞으로도 계속해서 해나갈 것으로 보입니다. 사실 마음 같으면 한국 정부가 이러한 정책연구소하고 좀 손을 잡고 정책연구 프로젝트들을 하는 것이 바람직할 것 같은데 근데 한국 정부들이 지금 이런 정도의 소스가 있는지 솔직히 잘 모르겠습니다. 기존의 뭐 헤리티지 재단 같은 경우에는 연계가 이미 많이 되어지고 오랫동안 관계를 가져온 것으로 잘 알려져 있는데 헤리티지 재단 같은 경우는 사실 이제 마가 유권자들보다는 좀 기득권 공화당 측의 기득권층과 연관이 더 깊기 때문에 오래전부터 이 네오콘들하고 깊은 관계를 가져왔기 때문에 사실은 이제 새로 만들어진 이 미국 제일주의 정책연구소 AFPI 이곳이 사실은 지금 한국 정부가 좀 관심을 가지고 접근해야 될 곳이라고 생각이 들고요. 뭐 이미 하고 있을지도 모르겠습니다만 저만 모르고 있을 수도 있으니까요. 이 시간 이후로 진행되는 출연자들이 좀 화려합니다. 일단 툴시 게버드가 강연을 맡게 되고요. 그리고 이제 그 Cpac의 부회장을 맡고 있는 찰리 지로우가 이제 볼소나로 브라질 전 대통령을 소개하는 그리고 볼소나로 대통령이 이제 연설하는 시간이 이어지겠고요. 그 다음에는 마이클 린델 마이필로의 CEO가 또 연설을 하겠습니다. 어떤 폭탄 발언을 할지 좀 기대가 되는 인물이죠. 그리고 로렌 보볼트, 이 콜로라도주의 아주 뭐 강성 우파 여전사죠. 로렌 보볼트 하원 의원이 또 연설을 하겠고요. 그 다음에는 고든창 박사가 합니다. 고든창은 중독통으로 알려져 있는 중국 공산당의 위험성을 일찌감치 미국 사회에 열심히 알려왔던 인물이고요. 학자입니다. 그리고 그 다음에는 앨리스 스테파닉 하원 의원이 하는데요. 앨리스 스테파닉은 하원에서 지금 하원 공화당 컨퍼런스의 의장을 맡고 있는 인물이고 트럼프에 의해서 그 자리에 올라간 인물이기도 합니다. 어떤 말이 나올지 제가 지금 기대해 보겠고요. 그 다음에는 이제 마이크 콜린스 조지아주의 연방 하원 의원이 또 이야기를 계속 이어나가게 됩니다. 계속해서 좋은 강연들이 기대가 됩니다. 채널 고정해 주시고 조금만 기다리시면 이제 곧바로 툴시 게버드부터 한 명씩 오늘의 정말 주요 인사들이 하나씩 나오게 될 거고요. 마지막은 도널드 트럼프 전 대통령의 연설로 오늘 행사가 마무리가 될 예정입니다. 계속 지켜봐 주시길 바라고요. 오늘 시청해 주시는 모든 분들 감사합니다.
탈모 샴푸 머릿결은 포기해야 되나?
더나 플러스 모르나?
66가지 자연 유래 성분과 영양 성분으로 힘있는 모발의 세정력, 머릿결, 두피 건강까지 빠짐없이 다 잡았다. 자연을 담은 탈모 샴푸 더나 플러스.
더나 플러스 탈모 샴푸 미주 출시 기념 특별 세일. 500ml 샴푸 2통과 앰플까지 89불. 가까운 판매처에서 만나세요.
잊지마 공석 탈모엔 더 나나나.
요즘 건물 사야 된다던데? 커머셜 전문 브로커 누가 좋지?
안드라스 부동산이지. 미국 모든 주에서 매매가 가능하다고. 쇼핑몰, 리테일, 오피스 빌딩, 호텔, 웨어하우스.
누구라고?
유튜브에 안드라스 윤 쳐봐.
이제는 철저히 준비된 전문성만이 수익성을 창출하는 시대입니다. 저 안드레스, 투자에 대한 답을 드리겠습니다.
안드라스커머셜닷컴에 더 많은 정보가 있습니다. 안드라스 부동산 770-802-0688.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 되어야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
네, 기다리는 시간이 좀 길어지는 것 같아서 잠깐 다시 들어왔습니다. 가능하면은 이제 지금부터는 매 연설을 바로바로 끝나자마자 메모를 좀 해서 내용을 전해드리도록 최선을 다해보겠습니다. 귀동량이 시원치 않긴 한데 최선을 다해서 한번 해보겠고요. 지금 좀 전에 제가 멜라니아 여사가 들어온 걸 본 것 같아서 깜짝 놀래가지고 막 카메라 셔터를 누르다가 지금 갑자기 블랙아웃 되는 현상이 생겼었는데 죄송하고요. 더 좋은 취재를 하고 싶어서 열심히 뛰고는 있는데 사실 좀 많은 한계를 느낍니다. 더 많은 분들이 좀 모였으면 좋겠다는 생각 들고요. 아까 잠깐 점심을 먹으러 나갔을 때 여기 오신 한국 분들을 귀하거든요. 여기 한국 분 만나기 정말 힘든데 한 두 분을 만났습니다. 근데 그분들이 한 분은 중국 분들과 함께 왔다라고 이야기를 하고요. 근데 그 중국 분들과 함께 동행해서 왔다라고 이야기하시는 분도 그렇고 그 다른 분도 그렇고 한 분은 뉴욕에서 오고 한 분은 워싱턴에 계시는 분인데 한결같이 하시는 이야기들이 중국 커뮤니티나 베트남 커뮤니티는 아주 잘 뭉쳐서 여러 가지 활동을 움직인다는 거죠. 활동을 한다는 것인데 한인들 같은 경우에는 말은 하고 알고는 있는데 움직이지를 않는다라는 이야기를 하시는 것을 들었습니다. 좀 아픈 이야기인데요. 사실 저희 주변에도 보면은 이제 그런 경우를 좀 많이 보죠. 이른바 한인 사회에서 보수층이다라고 이야기하시는 분들이 미국 정치 보수를 이야기하기보다는 오히려 이제 한국 정치에 더 깊이 빠져 계신 분들이 워낙 많이 계시죠. 물론 우리 모국이니까 한국도 잘 돼야 되는 건 분명한 사실입니다. 그리고 한국이 가경화되면서 나라가 많이 망가져 있기 때문에 한국도 지금 다시 바로잡기 위해서는 보수 정신이 좀 필요한, 이 보수 정신이 지금 어찌 보면 시대 정신일 수 있는 그런 상황이 되어져 있는 것은 뭐 사실입니다. 근데 어쨌든 한국은 그래도 보수를 표방한, 진짜 보수인지 아닌지는 모르지만 보수를 표방한 자유라는 정신을 표방하고 있는 윤석열 대통령이 지금 쥐고 있으니 정권을 잡았으니까 지금 지켜봐야 될 문제겠지만 어쨌든 지켜보고요. 잘하기를 응원하면 될 것 같은데 미국은 정작 우리가 살고 있는 삶의 터전 아닙니까? 우리가 살고 있는 이 삶의 터전이 망가져가고 있는 것을 계속 우리가 보면서 사실 지난 2, 3년 사이에 새롭게 정치에 대해서 각성하신 분들이 많이 있습니다. 그렇다면은 이제는 각성한 것으로 끝날 것이 아니라 행동으로 옮겨야 하는 것 아니냐라는
Ladies and
목소리들이 이제
gentlemen,
나오게
please
되는
welcome
겁니다.
former Congresswoman,
지금부터
Lieutenant Colonel in the
대법원
Army Reserves and host of
전
the
하원의원의
Tulsi
연설을
Gabbard Show,
들어보시겠습니다.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Thank you so much. Aloha. It's great to see all of you here today. Great to be among you. We are facing great challenges in our country. Now, for me, 20 years ago, I joined the Democratic Party because I was inspired by Democrats who took a stand for peace, who protested against the Vietnam War. I was inspired by leaders in my home state of Hawaii who fought for plantation workers who were being abused and exploited by their wealthy landowners. I was inspired by leaders like Martin Luther King, JFK, and I was drawn to the ideals of the Democratic Party at that time that welcomed all people from different backgrounds and views, that stood up and fought for working men and women, fought for the little guy, and that actually took a stand for free speech, for civil liberties. Now, as I stand here before you today, I am no longer a Democrat. Because I could not in good conscience remain in a party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers led by the queen of warmongers herself, Hillary Clinton, and embodied by President Joe Biden today, leaders who are driven by cowardly wokeness. I love this country and have taken an oath twice to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, both as a soldier who enlisted because of the terrorist attacks on 9/11, as well as a member of Congress, where I served for 8 years on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs committees. Now, today's Democratic Party is actively working to undermine our God-given rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. Fostering diversity of thought and freedom of expression is the foundation of any flourishing democracy. Democratic Party leaders disagree. They are led by fanatical ideologues, I think many of you have been exposed to them, who pose a threat to our democracy because they don't believe in freedom. They don't believe in freedom of speech or freedom of thought or freedom of religion. They don't believe in the right that every one of us has as Americans to express ourselves without fear of retribution or retaliation from our government. They demand purism to whatever their agenda is of the day, and they try to censor speech that they don't like, and they label it as, well, this is misinformation, disinformation, so-called hate speech or violent speech, and we have to censor this speech to protect you. I know this has happened to me, it's probably happened to a lot of you, but in doing so, they're undermining our civil liberties, and they're abusing their power by taking authorities in things like the Patriot Act and using secret FISA courts to illegally surveil Americans, working hand in glove with their partners in the corporate media and in big tech, actively working to silence and smear those of us who dare to challenge their authority. How can a political party that is opposed to freedom be trusted with our democracy? They can't, exactly. And we look at our Constitution, we recognize that our founders intentionally passed the Second Amendment right after the First. They recognized that every one of us has a right to defend ourselves and our loved ones, and that this right will serve as a check on the tyrannical government seeking to take away our God-given freedoms. There was a recent Supreme Court ruling that I felt stated very clearly and succinctly, quote, just as we do not need to seek a permit to stand on the street corner and exercise our right to free speech, we shouldn't have to seek permission for a law-abiding citizen to carry their firearm. We as a society don't get to pick and choose which of our rights in the Constitution are more worthy of protecting than another. Now, these words are powerful and relevant as they were when our founders included the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights as they are today, because the Democratic Party's hatred of the Second Amendment and their increasing authoritarian instincts pose a serious threat to our freedoms and is exactly why our rights shall not be infringed. Our founders were visionaries in many ways, and they recognized that our freedoms come from God, not the government. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party leaders reject this truth, and as a result are openly hostile towards people of faith and spirituality, actively trying to undermine our religious freedom and therefore the spiritual foundation of this country. We've seen over time how high-profile Democratic leaders mock or openly discriminate against people of faith, especially Christians, as we went back to the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, her faith being judged. We've seen most recently the FBI setting its sights on those they deem as radical traditional Catholics, suggesting that they need to develop sources within the church and go and monitor people in their place of worship. One of the characteristics of a radical traditional Catholic is you choose to go to traditional Latin Mass. Insanity. Thomas Jefferson said, "God who gave us life gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God?" To recognize each other as children of God is to appreciate that every one of us belongs to God and to no one else. No government, no person, no individual has the right to take away the freedom that God has given us. This is the foundation of the social construct that is the United States of America. This is the core of who we are as Americans. I love you too. And we love and respect each other, recognizing that we are all children of God. We recognize that each of us has this intrinsic right within our own hearts to have a deeply personal relationship with God, and the freedom to express and practice that faith without fear of any state-sponsored reprisal or censorship or discrimination. Any political party that is trying to erase the presence of God from every facet of public life, as the Democratic Party is doing, and is hostile towards those who choose to worship God, they cannot be trusted to protect our inalienable God-given rights enshrined in the Constitution and should not be in power. Unfortunately, we live in a country today where the Democratic Party, in their blind pursuit of power, reject this truth. They refuse to recognize that we are all God's children, and therefore they reduce each of us to the color of our skin. They're using identity politics to tear us apart. They are fomenting anti-white racism and fanning the flames of divisiveness, all for their own political gain. And what's so disturbing about this is they are proud of it. This is not something happening behind the curtains. President Biden's press secretary, I think you probably saw the other day, she was there at the podium in the White House listing off proudly all of these statistics and quoting the quote-unquote diversity of the Biden administration, talking about gender and race and sexuality, but not talking about capabilities and accomplishments. They're directly betraying Dr. Martin Luther King's dream as they racialize every issue, doing the exact opposite of what Dr. King preached, judging us purely based on the color of our skin, rather than on the content of our character. They've become the racists that they claim to hate. And dangerously, they reject things like objective truth. They reject the fact that there is such a thing as a woman. I think all the ladies here can attest to we are in fact real. Yes? Now, I've seen and I've been and I served in Congress for 8 years, and I've listened to these speeches where they claim to be champions of women and equal rights and self-proclaimed feminists, but the reality is the Biden administration is spitting in the face of every one of us as women by rejecting the fact that we as women exist and are not just a construct of someone's mind. And this right here is their hypocrisy exposed. There is no greater expression of hatred and hostility towards women than trying to erase us as an entire category of people. Even worse, they're going so far as to claim that it's sexual harassment to address someone by the wrong pronouns, trying to enforce compliance by regulating our speech and thought. The danger here is that when those in power deny the existence of objective truth, we take away all boundaries in our society, and the truth becomes whatever those in power say it is at any given time. Just to list a few examples of this insanity, they are trying to tell us pedophilia is normal because minor attracted persons should be respected and accepted, and allowing these people to go and teach our kids in school. It is sick. They support and promote the mutilation of children through the use of puberty blockers and chemical castration and irreversible surgeries, all in the name of so-called gender-affirming care. This is being actively promoted by cabinet members in the Biden administration and President Biden himself. And it's not just an idea. They are threatening to take children away from parents who refuse to comply and are actually standing up for the safety and well-being of their kids. They're normalizing infanticide by advocating for abortion on demand without exception, even up to and after birth. They believe that government is responsible for raising our kids, not our parents. Terry McAuliffe in Virginia saying, hey, you as parents don't get a say in your kids' education. These things go beyond simple differences in opinion or having different views on an issue, because the party that is in power in the White House right now is weaponizing the security state and federal agencies against political opponents and those of us who dare to challenge them, those who dare to speak truth and common sense in the face of their insane radical agenda. The strength of our democracy relies on our trust, we the people's trust in the rule of law, and by weaponizing these public institutions for their own benefit, Democratic leaders are undermining the rule of law and turning our democracy into a banana republic. Now, the list of examples of how they're doing this is too long. We don't have enough time to go through them today, but just to name a few, you remember Obama using the IRS to target conservative organizations. We have Biden's Department of Justice arresting peaceful pro-life protesters and sending them to prison. He's labeled supporters of President Trump as the most extremist group in our country and a threat to our democracy. They created the Domestic Terror Unit, the Department of Homeland Security, to go after parents for having the audacity to show up at their Board of Education and say, we don't want you teaching our kids about sexuality. We don't want you taking them to drag shows. We don't want you bringing sex toys to second graders in school. And of course, we had Chuck Schumer directly threatening Supreme Court justices with consequences if they dared to overturn Roe v. Wade. When the party in power doesn't believe in the rule of law, but they're the ones responsible for not only writing, but enforcing those laws, our democracy is doomed. There are a lot more examples I could give, but the most pressing and urgent existential threat of them all is that President Biden has pushed us, the American people and the world, to the precipice of nuclear war. waging a new Cold War, risking the start of World War III that can only result in destroying the world as we know it. Now, I love our country. I'm proud to serve and wear the uniform as a soldier in the Army Reserves. And as a soldier, I know firsthand the importance of ensuring our military is trained, ready, and capable to fulfill our mission, to ensure the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. So no matter how much lip service President Biden and the Democratic Party give as they say, well, we are for freedom and security and democracy, the reality is that they don't really care about any of those things. They are focused on filling the pockets of their bosses in the military-industrial complex, despite the fact that doing so actually undermines our national security, economy, and future. Now, President Biden and warmongers from both parties in Congress, they've sent now over $100 billion to fuel this proxy war that the United States and NATO is waging against Russia through Ukraine. Last week, it was another $500 million. Yesterday, it's another $400 million of our taxpayer money, continuing to escalate this war that could at any moment spark a direct conflict between the US and NATO and Russia, the world's most nuclear-armed country. Now, the insanity of all this is you have President Biden, leaders in the Biden administration, warmongers in Washington, all talking about this as though it's just another day, talking about the prospect of World War III and nuclear war with a straight face about how it can be won. Now, President Reagan understood how ridiculous that notion is and how dangerous it is. He recognized the existential threat of standing on the brink of nuclear war, and he said a nuclear war can never be won and should never be fought. It was true then, and it's true today. He exercised the courageous leadership necessary to walk us back from the brink of nuclear war then. We lack that courageous leadership today. The warmongering elite, they don't care. They don't care about the consequences of their policies and their decisions because, trust me, they've got the bunkers that they can go to protect themselves and their families where they can continue to wage these wars, even in the event of a nuclear attack, and they're completely fine with leaving the rest of us to perish because we have no shelter. We have no place to go. Now, I raised this issue when I ran for president in 2020, every day on the campaign and on the national debate stage, but the politicians and the media, they didn't care then and they don't care now. They ignored this because they don't care about us. The reality is, though, it doesn't need to be this way. Our future is in our hands. But we have no time to waste. To protect our children, to protect our loved ones, to protect this country that we love, we have to lift our voices and stand up to these cowardly warmongering positions in both parties and stop them from destroying us all. Now, when I was deployed to Iraq during the height of that war, there was a big sign at the main gate that our patrols went into and out of every single day. Now, that sign struck me the first day that I saw it, and every day after. It read in big block letters, "Is today the day? Is today the day?" It was a daily reminder to me and to every one of us that any day could be our last. It was a reminder to me to take shelter in God and His unconditional love, and to make the most of every day that I have to do my best to love Him and to live a life of service that's pleasing to Him. The truth of that message on that sign is just as relevant to us here today as it was to those of us who were deployed to Iraq. Life is short. None of us knows how much time we have. And so, as Americans who love this country, no matter what our differences may be, as people who cherish peace, security, and freedom. We have no time to waste. Our country is calling on us. And motivated by love, aloha, we must stand together. We must draw inspiration from the ideals and the hopes that our founders had for this country, the hopes that they had for us, and be the spark that lights that fire of change where we can save our country, defend our future, and truly bring about a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. God bless you all. Thank you very much. Aloha. Thank you so much.
예, 지금 이제 tulsi 게버드 전 하원의원의 이야기를 들으셨는데요. 마치 뭐 대통령 후보 출마 연설하는 것 같은 그런 분위기. 네, 전체적으로 지금 나온 이야기들은 미국이 어떤 위기 속에 빠져 있는지에 대해서 하나씩 조목조목 이야기하고 이번 Cpac 행사에서 가장 중요한 이슈로 잡고 있는 거의 모든 이야기들 한 것 같습니다. 국경 문제 빼놓고는 거의 다 이야기가 나온 것 같은데요. 특별히 이제 자유에 대한 이야기로부터 시작을 하고요. 자유는 하나님이 우리 인간에게 주신 것이지 정부가 우리에게 준 것이 아니다라는 이야기, 이걸 분명하게 좀 지목을 했고요. 존 F 케네디 전 대통령이 이런 말을 했는데 우리에게 생명을 주신 하나님이 우리에게 자유를 주셨다, 이런 이야기를 했다라는 것이죠. 그리고 이제 성별 문제, 성별 확인 치료라는 것이 있죠. 이 미성년자 아이들한테 본인이 아무래도 나는 성 정체성에 좀 다른 것 같다 이렇게 생각하는 사람들에게 성별 확인 치료를 하게끔 성 호르몬 방지제를 처방해주는, 그래서 그런 치료를 하는 것인데 이걸 지금 막겠다라는 주들이 여러 주가 나와 있습니다. 어제 마조리 테일러 그린 의원은 이것을 전국적으로 막는 법을 발의하겠다라고 발표를 했었는데, 어쨌든 이 성별 확인 치료 이 문제를 실제로 아이들에게 대형 제약회사들이 강요하고 있다, 뭐 이런 문제를 지금 지적을 했고요. 계속해서 또 다른 연설 또 다른 순서 좀 진행되겠습니다. 계속 보시겠습니다.
Like so many of you, I am blessed, truly blessed, to be a citizen of the greatest nation in the history of the world, the United States of America. But unlike many, I'm a citizen by choice because I wasn't privileged to be born here. I was born in a slum in southern Brazil. My birth mother realized that she couldn't take care of me. And so she took me to a little mission and asked for me to be put up for adoption. She asked only one thing of those people there. She said she wanted her baby to come to America because she believed that if I came to this great land, perhaps I'd be able to learn how to read. And so today I know she's looking down with a smile at the fact that not only did I learn how to read, but that I have the great honor of introducing our next speaker. And you know, the media, when I told that story in public for the first time, I had some hotshot young reporter come running up to me demanding to know, why were you born in Brazil? So I had to think for a minute, and I said, well, I wanted to be close to my mother. Brazil, as you know, is a great nation, the giant of South America, bigger in land mass than the continental United States, with more than 215 million souls living there. And it's a beautiful country with rich and fertile soil, with incredible natural resources, with superb ports, with great climate, and with wonderful people. And yet it's not a world superpower, because for generations it's been held back by two things: by socialism and corruption. And after decades of left-wing despotism, one man stood up and took on the leftists in Brazil. Jair Bolsonaro stood up and ran for president. And just 1 month before the election, the day before Brazilian Independence Day, a leftist activist stabbed him in the gut, ripping him open from his chest to his waist. And as he lay there between life and death, his son Flavio, his brother Eduardo is with us today and has spoken at Cpac so many times, told the people of Brazil, my father can no longer lead us, it's now up to us. And as a result, the people of Brazil took Jair Bolsonaro to a great victory with over 55% of the vote. And the people of Brazil won, because in 4 short years, President Bolsonaro cut taxes on energy, put billions of dollars into education, created the lowest unemployment in a decade, this during the pandemic. And he brought millions of companies and new jobs to this country. And his wife, Michelle, the beautiful First Lady of Brazil, took poor children who would never have otherwise had the opportunity to the palace each weekend so that they could swim in the presidential pool. And finally, he relaxed Brazil's crazy laws on private ownership of guns, allowing more people in the private sector to have guns in their hands, and as a result, crime went dramatically down. But unfortunately, he couldn't control the Supreme Court of Brazil, which oversees their elections. And so he lost the closest election in Brazilian history and toppled one of the last dominoes in the Western Hemisphere, so that today, from Canada to Argentina, from Trudeau to Fernandez, and don't forget Joe Biden in the middle, we have socialist governments elected in so many cases by, shall we say, questionable elections. And as Jair Bolsonaro comes before us today, where is Lula da Silva? On his way to China and allowing Iranian warships into Brazilian harbors, which Senator Cruz told us the other day is a direct threat to the people and security of the United States of America. That's the difference between what has happened in Brazil historically and what's happening there today. But we know this: the fight goes on, and we know who ultimately wins. And so we thank God for Jair Bolsonaro. We ask you to pray for Brazil. And por favor, seja bem-vindo o 38º presidente do Brasil, meu presidente, Jair Bolsonaro.
Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Desculpe-me.
I'm sorry.
Mas nessa terra eu me sinto no Brasil.
But in this land I feel like I'm in Brazil.
A terra da liberdade, do progresso e da ordem.
Land of freedom, progress and order.
É o que muito político sempre fala, mas não cumpre.
It's what many politicians
não é
usually
fácil
say,
ser político.
But don't
Pelo menos para aqueles que querem honrar a sua palavra e quer fazer o bem ao próximo.
It is not easy to be a politician, especially when you want to honor your word and help people.
Nesse momento, eu agradeço a Deus pela minha segunda vida.
In this moment, I thank God for my second life.
E também a Ele pela missão de ser presidente da República por mandato.
And also for the mission of being the president of Brazil for one term.
Mas eu sinto, lá no fundo, que essa missão ainda não acabou.
But I feel deep inside that this mission is not over.
Como o apresentador agora há pouco falou que era brasileiro e veio para cá, e aqui fez a sua história.
As Charlie Gero just said that he's a Brazilian and he came here and here he made his story.
Eu também venho de uma família pobre. Jamais esperava ser presidente do Brasil.
I also come from a poor family, and I never expected to be president of Brazil.
Mas quando vi uma comunista ser reeleita no meu país, eu resolvi enfrentar esse desafio.
But when I witnessed a communist being re-elected in my country, I decided to face this challenge.
Tinha um passado de 15 anos de exército e 30 de parlamento.
In my past, I had served the army for 15 years, and I was a congressman for 30 years.
E ao longo da campanha, me segurei numa passagem bíblica.
And during my campaign, I held myself through a Bible verse.
João 8:32.
John 8:32.
E conhecereis a verdade, e a verdade vos libertará.
You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
O Brasil é uma grande nação, muito rica.
Brazil is a great nation, very rich nation.
Mas não se desenvolvia.
But it would not develop.
Populismo, comunismo e corrupção é o que sempre dominou a política brasileira.
Populism, communism, and corruption always dominated politics in Brazil.
Por 4 anos, numa pré-campanha, andei pelo meu grande país.
For 4 years, during the pre-campaign, I walked through my great country.
Levando a verdade, sem se preocupar com os votos.
Taking the truth to people without worrying about votes.
Andando sozinho pelo Brasil.
Walking through Brazil by myself.
Como há 2 anos antes das eleições, parei numa pequena cidade do Amazonas chamada Manacapuru.
2 years ago, I stopped in a city in the Amazon, in a small city called Paracapuru.
As pessoas me receberam num porto e com toda certeza pensaram, que esse cara sozinho está fazendo aqui? E eu também me perguntei, o que eu estou fazendo aqui?
People received me in the port and they all thought, what is he doing here by himself? And I also asked myself, what am I doing here by myself?
Quase ninguém acreditava que eu poderia ter sucesso.
No one believed that I could be successful.
Fomos crescendo, a esquerda viu que eu era um alvo difícil de ser abatido.
We started to grow and the left noticed that I was a difficult target to be defeated.
E um esquerdista filiado a um partido de esquerda, PSOL, deu uma facada em mim em setembro de 2018.
And a leftist who was a member of a leftist party, the Socialist Party, stabbed me in September of 2018.
Com toda certeza, eu sou o ex mais amado do Brasil.
For sure, I am the former president who's most loved in Brazil.
Mesmo no leito de morte, mas com muita força e muita fé, ganhamos as eleições.
Even in my deathbed, but with much faith and much hope, we won the elections.
Montamos um grande ministério.
We put together a great cabinet.
Com pessoas capacitadas e patriotas.
With capable people who are above all were patriots.
Ao longo de 4 anos, assim como todo mundo, enfrentamos a pandemia e um conflito entre Rússia e Ucrânia.
And through those 4 years, we faced the pandemic as the whole world and a conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
Com reflexos econômicos para todos nós.
With economic consequences for all of us.
Fizemos a nossa parte e até o final do ano passado, os números da economia bem demonstram que o Brasil foi um expoente nessa batalha.
And we did our part, and the numbers of our economy show that we did a good job.
Sempre defendi a liberdade.
I always defended freedom.
Não obriguei a ninguém a tomar vacina no Brasil.
I did not force anyone to be vaccinated in Brazil.
Tem certos assuntos no Brasil que são proibidos de ser tratados.
There are certain themes in Brazil that cannot be spoken.
É a vacina.
One of them is the vaccine.
É o tempo todo, é ciência, 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 ciência.
They keep saying science, science, science.
E eu digo, é liberdade, liberdade, liberdade.
But what I say is freedom, freedom, freedom.
Com toda certeza, eu fui o político mais atacado pela grande mídia em nosso país.
Certainly, no one was more attacked by the big media than me.
Mas mesmo assim, eu nunca tomei uma medida contra a imprensa.
But even with all those attacks, I never took any measure against the press.
Eu entendo que uma imprensa, até errando, ela é melhor do que uma imprensa calada.
I believe that a press, even when they make mistakes, are better than a press that cannot speak.
Se olhar as imagens aqui, ao lado,
if you look at the screens, the images on the screens,
eu tive muito mais apoio em 2022 do que 2018.
You will notice that I had way more support in 2022 than I had in 2018.
Não sei por quê. Os números mostraram o contrário.
And I don't understand why the numbers reflected the opposite.
Nós não aceitamos ir para o outro lado da esplanada.
We did not accept to go to the other side of our capital,
onde a minha vida pessoal seria muito mais facilitada.
Where my personal life would have been much easier.
Fiquei ao lado dos meus princípios, ao lado de Deus e do povo brasileiro.
I chose to stand next to my principles, next to God, and next to the Brazilian people.
A coerência é que marca as nossas vidas.
Coherency is what marks our life.
Não sou pastor e nem padre.
I'm not a priest nor a pastor.
Apenas cristão.
I'm only a Christian.
E nós, muitas vezes, nos perguntamos.
And many times we ask ourselves.
Da onde viemos, para onde vamos?
Where did we come from and where are we going?
Nesse intervalo, há um tempo onde ficará registrado o nosso currículo, o que fizemos aqui na Terra.
In this space, there's a time that will be registered in our resume. What have we done in this planet?
Do fundo do coração, como é gratificante ser recebido em qualquer lugar do Brasil e do mundo com esse calor.
And from deep in my heart, I must say how it's so gratifying to be received like this, anywhere in Brazil and anywhere in the world.
Costuma-se dizer que todo poder emana do povo.
I always say that every power comes from the people.
Mas o povo precisa de lideranças.
But the people need leaders.
Aqui eu vejo muitas.
Here I see many leaders.
E nós só podemos proporcionar felicidade ao nosso povo se nós formos leais a eles.
And we will only be able to provide for the happiness of our people if we are loyal to our people.
Quando se fala em conservadorismo,
when we speak of conservatism,
o que nós queremos e lutamos são coisas básicas.
What we fight for are basic things.
Família.
Family.
Não queremos ideologia de gênero.
We don't want gender ideology.
Queremos os filhos crescendo à semelhança do pai e as filhas da mãe.
We want children growing looking up to their father, boys and girls looking up to their mothers.
No Brasil, a propriedade privada encontra-se ameaçada.
In Brazil, private property is threatened.
Ela, no meu entender, é um dos pilares da democracia.
Private property is one of the pillars of democracy.
A vida, desde a sua concepção, foi a nossa defesa, sempre contra o aborto.
Life from its conception was always defended by us against abortion.
Também, no meu governo, liberei o máximo possível, nos limites da lei, a posse e o porte de arma de fogo.
And in my government, I relaxed as much as I could regulations on gun ownership.
Em 4 anos, diminuiu-se em 1/3 o número de mortes por arma de fogo no Brasil.
And in 4 years, we were able to reduce 1/3 the number of deaths by weapons in Brazil, by firearms in Brazil.
A primeira medida desse novo velho governo foi revogar os meus decretos.
And the first measure of this old new government was to take away these decrees.
Sempre disse no Brasil.
I always said in Brazil,
povo armado jamais será escravizado.
An armed people will never be enslaved.
E país armado jamais será subjugado.
And an armed nation will never be subjugated.
É indispensável falar aos senhores que o meu relacionamento com o presidente Donald Trump foi simplesmente excepcional.
And it's indispensable for me to tell all of you that my relationship with President Donald Trump was simply exceptional.
E nós podemos assistir quem está certo.
And now,
nós ou eles?
And now we know who is right. We are right or they are right?
Aqui, pelo que parece, a gente vê uma migração de pessoas do Estado democrata para o republicano.
We've been seeing apparently here in America a migration of people coming from the Democrat states to the Republican states.
Vão buscar melhores condições de vida.
They're looking for better life conditions.
No Brasil não é diferente.
In Brazil it's not different.
Há uma migração da população de estados administrados pela esquerda em direção àqueles de centro-direita.
People are moving from those states that are run by the left to those who are run by the center and the right.
Mas a liberdade é algo que tem que ser tratado com absoluta preocupação.
But we must always be preoccupied with our liberties.
É como grande amor.
It's just like a great love.
Você tem que cuidar dele todo dia para não perdê-lo.
You must take care of it every day not to lose it.
E nós assistimos,
and we have witnessed,
não apenas no Brasil, mas no mundo todo,
not only in Brazil but in the entire world,
a sanha para regulamentar as mídias sociais.
The excitement of the left to regulate social media.
Mais liberdade, no meu entender, é o controle para as mídias sociais.
The best way to control the social media is more freedom.
Fiz a minha campanha em 2018 com as mídias sociais.
I ran my campaign in 2018 through social media.
No total, gastei menos de $1 milhão.
In total, I spent less than $1 million.
Eu sei que é inacreditável.
It's unbelievable.
Mas as imagens mostram aqui.
But you can see on the
Isso aconteceu ao longo de 4 anos no Brasil.
This happened throughout 4 years in Brazil.
Não só em datas festivas, como em qualquer outro momento que eu tenha aterrissado em qualquer ponto do nosso Brasil.
It wouldn't happen only on special dates or when I landed specifically in any point, in any place in Brazil.
No início, eu perguntava, né? Meu Deus, o que eu fiz para pagar um preço tão alto como esse de ser presidente da República?
In the beginning, I would ask God, God, what did I do to pay such a hefty price to be the president of Brazil?
Não tinha dia de descanso.
I had no rest days.
Depois, eu mudei.
But later I changed.
E comecei a falar, obrigado, meu Deus, por essa oportunidade.
And I started to tell God, thank you so much, God, for this opportunity.
Levei aos 4 cantos do Brasil.
I took to the 4 corners of Brazil.
E o povo brasileiro, que mal conhecia as cores da sua bandeira, passou a amá-la.
And the Brazilian people who had forgotten the colors of its flag began to love it.
O povo começou a entender de política.
People started to understand more about politics.
Passou a conhecer o parlamento brasileiro.
Started to know better the Brazilian Congress.
Nome de deputados e senadores passou a fazer parte do seu dia a dia e não mais apenas jogadores de futebol.
And the name of congressmen and senators became part of Brazilians' daily life, not just soccer players.
Eu tenho certeza que nós plantamos muitas sementes no Brasil.
I am certain that we planted many seeds in Brazil.
Elegemos pessoas que eram desconhecidas da grande população.
We elected many people who were unknown by
mas
the
com
population,
enorme potencial.
but with a great potential.
Como alguns que me acompanham aqui agora.
And many of them are here with me today.
Outros que ficaram no Brasil, mas se elegeram deputados federais, senadores e governadores.
Others who were elected to the House, to governors, to senators.
Eu sempre disse a eles, o ideal é que o povo não nos procure.
I always tell them, the best case scenario is if the people does not need us.
Porque assim é sinal que eles estão bem.
Because that's a signal that they are doing well.
O tempo está se acabando. Teria muita coisa a falar, mas nós devemos respeitar o tempo.
Unfortunately, time is almost up. I have many things to say, but I must respect our time.
Dizer a todos vocês que eu sempre admirei o povo norte-americano.
I must tell all of you that I always admired the American people.
O Brasil é importante para o mundo.
Brazil is important for the world.
Hoje, mais de 1 bilhão de pessoas dependem de nós para a sua segurança alimentar.
Today, more than 1 billion people around the world depend on Brazil to be able to eat.
Temos riquezas minerais que ninguém tem no mundo.
We have mineral riches that few countries have in the world.
Só o Brasil tem nióbio.
Only Brazil has niobium.
Temos água potável em abundância.
We have an abundant amount of drinkable water.
Temos o Amazônia, que é nossa, dos brasileiros.
We have an Amazon that belongs to us, to Brazilians.
Convido-os a visitarem a Amazônia.
I invite all of you to visit the Amazon forest.
Vão conhecê-la como ela é e não como a imprensa pinta.
Please come to visit as it really is and not like the press.
Somos um país de paz.
We are a peaceful country.
Se eu fosse presidente, não teríamos esse problema agora com os navios iranianos.
If I was president, you could rest assured that we would not have this problem with the Iranian vessels that are in Brazil refueling.
A todos vocês, eu quero agradecer esse momento. E assim como vocês, eu quero ter o prazer de daqui a pouco.
I would like to thank all of you, and just like you, I would like to have the pleasure in a few moments
assistir Donald Trump a fazer uso desse palco.
To be able to watch Donald Trump come on stage.
Eu fui o último presidente a reconhecer as eleições de há 2 anos aqui nos Estados Unidos.
I was the last president in the world to recognize the results of the elections in America 2 years ago.
Continuo fiel aos nossos princípios.
I continue to be loyal to our principles.
Ao nosso lema.
I'm still faithful to our motto.
Deus, pátria, família e liberdade.
God, homeland, liberty. God, homeland, family and liberty.
Muito obrigado a todos os senhores.
Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CEO of My Pillow, Mike Lindell.
Thank you, everybody. What do you think I'm going to talk about? We need to melt down the machines and turn them into prison bars. President Bolsonaro, I'm very good friends with his son, Eduardo, and we were watching Brazil, what happened in their election, my cyber team and everybody. And I want to tell you, they stole over 10 million votes that we know of there. But I want to tell you something. They don't have any paper. It's just a machine. That's all it is. So like I said, they could just have little bells on, little lights. Vote, vote, vote. Beep. It could be hollow. Beep. And the winner is Lula. You know, this is where we're at. And I want to tell you, if we don't get rid of the machines, we're going to lose our country like Brazil. Over 50 countries in the world have succumbed to the machines. All of South America now, Australia, the list goes on and on and on. And for the last 2 years, we've seen this, and people's eyes are getting opened every day going, oh, let's, it was because of this, it was because of this. Well, let me tell you, you all know when I ran for the RNC chair, right? Okay, well, when I got there, one of the things I was talking to him, I go, hey, you guys, I said, at the RNC, for 7 months, their Gmails were going into spam. Crooked Google was forcing them into spam, right? Happened to me at My Pillow, so I know all about this stuff. What computers can do. So month after month went by, and they're going, let's just wait another month. Maybe it won't happen again. It happened again. Another month. All the efforts they did to put into marketing and stuff for this business, the RNC, I'm just using them for an example because I talked to them about this. At the end of 7 months, they finally said, we've got to sue Google. We've got to go after them. We have to do something or we're going to lose our RNC. So finally they did. Google turned it back on, said it was a programming error. Turned it back on. Now everybody at the RNC, when I talked there, all of the 168, they all said, yeah, we get that. Boy, it's a good thing we did that. Well, what is the difference of that or an electronic voting machine? Okay, and I want to tell you that the RNC, I don't care how much that they wasted or all the things you read about and they spent money on this or that, you can't outspend an algorithm in a machine. You can't do it. It's over. They did for 5 elections in a row, losing, 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 losing. If you don't fix the playing field you're on, it's over. If we don't fix what's going on in our country, we are going to be Brazil. We are going to be Venezuela, and we have to do this. And you know what the biggest blockers are right now? I got teams of people in every state. In fact, I'm going to announce in a minute this new thing I have. It's called the Election Crime Bureau. You can all go there. Okay? Not election integrity. That's a weak word. It's election crime. We have to address what's happened, and we have to be proactive and prevent crime from happening again. And we go into We have brave, and it's all about courage. We have brave people that have stood up. I'll give you an example. In Arkansas, they work hard. This is the stuff we're up against, everybody. In Arkansas, Cleburne County about a month ago, because they have the right to do it in their state. Most states, you can do it from the county up. Said, you know what? We don't want to use these machines. We want paper ballots hand counted. And by the way, the best paper ballot hand-counted system in world history was developed in Missouri by a gal named Linda Rand. And how do I know this? Because I've talked to Germany and France and the UK and Netherlands where they use hand-counted paper ballots. Her system's better, and we have it right here in the USA. So we go to Arkansas, and Cleburne County gets brave and does this. Well, then just a week later, or a couple weeks later, I guess, a senator there, I won't name it, well, yeah, I will, Kim Hammer. Kim Hammer, a Republican, puts a bill, it's called SB 250 in Arkansas, puts a bill out there and says, if you're a county and you go to paper, we're gonna defund you. Now I want you to think about that. This is our own people, or supposedly. You know, it's disgusting. Why would you do that? And you know what they said? Well, Arkansas is 65% red. We're all red. Well, you're 82% red if you knew the numbers. And I asked you, and it's usually all these Republican states, your Alabamas, your Ohios, your Arkansas, your Missouris, your Louisiana, your Mississippi. I would think I'd be able to go in there and say, hey, let's fix our election platforms so all the campaigning and all the hard work and all the resources put in actually can be worth something. And when you get in there and we fight our own party, like horrible Robin Voss in Wisconsin, Brad Ratzenberger in Georgia, it's just disgusting. We have great things going on in every state in this country. Right now, Shasta County, pray for them. They're in California. They voted to go paper-free. They've been attacked by everything from all the way up to the Attorney General of California. They're in fear. I had to go out there. You know what I did? I had to tell them, I will cover the money if they go after you and sue you. Because people are in fear. People are in fear. But you know what? If we don't have courage now, it's over. You can't save your courage for a rainy day because we are under a time. If we don't get in 2024, get our great real president back, Donald Trump, it's over. And I want to say this, so at the RNC, because I'm going to do a call out to them. If you all know that Ronna McDaniel said that she looked forward to working with Mike Lindell, you know, well, what do you think? If you're working with me, what do you think you're going to work on? It's pretty obvious. Well, I'm announcing putting everything under one roof in this country, everything that all people across this country have been doing, different groups. We've been trying to keep it all organized, but now we have the electioncrimebureau.com. You can all check it out. I'm making the announcement here, and you can all use your help, get there. But I'm asking that the RNC endorse this. I don't need any help from them. I just want them to endorse it. And you know why? I want to be able to go into these states and not have to be blocked by Republicans and stopped. I want to be able to fix what they should have fixed. They should have took their money and fixed these platforms, got rid of early voting, got rid of these dirty voter rolls, got rid of the machines. There's a big narrative going around right now. Oh yeah, we're going to be like Democrats and we're going to vote early and often. You know what? You better quit spreading that, because I'll tell you what, it's 2 years from now, or a year and a half from now. If you do that, what's going to happen, that we fought with these legislatures, they're going to say, let's just make early voting perfectly legal and ballot harvesting legal. You guys, we lose our country if you do that. Everything we fought for, the legislature, that's an easy way out for them. We want same-day voting, paper ballot, hand counted. That's what's going to save your country. The answer is right in front of us all. You just seen the great Brazil, the great President Bolsonaro. He won by a landslide. And let them try and explain that like you see the Republicans doing, some of them, oh yeah, that was just bad candidates and oh, we can campaign harder and raise more money. Tell that to President Bolsonaro. one machine, one button, just like when you send Google, you send Gmails into the abyss, you send your votes into an abyss. And so I'm here to tell you that there is hope in our country. Here's the last thing I will say. We won. We started winning on January 8th of 2021. And what happened on January 7th and 8th? Those are the days that 1.2 million Americans were deplatformed, including our great President Donald Trump, on Twitter, Crooked Vimeo, Google, Facebook, Suckabuck's Facebook, all these platforms. Churches were deplatformed. Everyone was. They tried to kill our voice. They tried to kill our voice, but they didn't quite do it. Like Ronald Reagan said, when the lights go out here, they're like a beacon on a hill. They go out everywhere. The light was almost out then. And you know what that was? That was our voice. But now our voice has come back loud and clear. And this is the importance of Cpac, is to spread the right message. And the right message is you got to spread hope. One of the things I want to say too is with what's going on with the border, with fentanyl pouring across our border now, and combining that with people that are feeling hopeless, it's deadly. It's killing people. And we have to, but I will tell you that there is hope. You need to tell people there is hope. You need to spread the word of the good things going on. We have over 60 lawsuits going on to help win this country, to help get the judges, and we pray the judges make decisions. I know they're putting music. All I'm saying is, you know what, guys? Keep the faith. Everything's had to happen on God's timing, not ours. We are in the greatest revival for Jesus Christ in history. That's the big win. God bless you all. Thank you. Keep the faith.
Extraordinary.
네,
지금 보소나우로 대통령이 한 이야기들은 지금 보면은 브라질의 정치 현실이 지금 미국의 정치 현실하고 그렇게 크게 다르지 않는 이런 모습을 좀 보여주고 있는 것이고요. 본인이 대통령 선거에서 졌다라는 것이 이해가 되지 않는다라는 이야기를 하고 있습니다. 그러니까 지난 대통령 선거 결과에 대해서 본인이 인정할 수 없다라는 입장을 분명하게 밝히는 시간이었고요. 계속해서 영상으로 보여주었습니다. 보소나우로 대통령이 국민들을 만나고 있을 때 국민들이 어떻게 열광했는지, 그러한 많은 국민들이 보소나우로 대통령 앞에 나와서 환호하는 이 모습이 4년 내내 계속됐다라는 이야기를 하면서 그런 이야기를 했고요. 결국에는 보수주의자로서 보수적인 정책을 펼치려고 했던 거였는데 그래서 백신 얘기도 나왔었고 여러 가지 얘기가 나왔습니다만은 이러한 부분들이 지금 전 세계적으로 이러한 공격들이 이루어지고 있는 것이 분명한 사실인 것 같습니다. 다음 순서는요, 로렌 로버트 하원 의원이 나오게 됩니다. 린델 사장이 얘기했던 건 여러분들 다 알아들으셨죠? 선거에 관련한 부분이고요. 선거의 문제를 바로잡기 위해서는 같은 날 하루에 투표해야 되고 종이 투표용지 이용해야 된다. 해외에서는 이미 이렇게 해가지고 선거 시스템을 올바르게 바로잡아가고 있는데 왜 미국은 못하고 있느냐, 이런 목소리를 냈습니다. 자, 로렌 로버트 하원 의원 이제 들어보시겠습니다.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Colorado, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert.
One heck of a fight the first week of Congress. We heard from you. You said that Congress is broken, and we went to D.C. to fix it. We did not back down. We came to make historic, fundamental changes in Washington, D.C. And that's exactly what the American people have been demanding. The changes that we made allow for single subject legislation. You know, 47 state legislatures actually go to the House floor and amend bills. What a concept. Giving everyone a voice, giving every member a seat at the table in the legislative progress. This is what you demanded, and this is what we delivered. It was absolutely worth taking a few extra days to make sure we got this right. But we have to make sure that these promises made and these promises that are kept keep on happening. We cannot slow down, and if anything, we need to get more aggressive. Some people say, hey, it's only March, but I say, it's already March. There are many things that we must do in this House majority that you, the American people, have entrusted us with. There is a lot of oversight that we need to do in this Congress. There are many agencies in the federal government that have gone woke. And you know the saying, folks, if you go woke, you go broke. We are going to make sure that all of these agencies that have been working against you, that have been weaponized against you, the American people, have congressional oversight, have an audit, and if there is any woke program in these agencies, it is immediately defunded. That's right, part of the Speaker concessions, we now fund the government as intended. We have gotten rid of the horrific omnibus bills. And this is our opportunity to not just get spending under control, but to ensure that we have the right policies. In these 12 appropriations bills, we have to make sure that we are undoing everything the left has done legislatively to destroy our country. Every diversity, equity, and inclusion program, every ESG rule, every woke initiative in our military must be uprooted and completely defunded. We will demand that schools stop teaching our children to hate their country, to hate their classmates because of the color of their skin, and stop confusing our babies with your groomer gender ideologue. Shame on you. Every one of these agencies, every last one of them needs an audit. The federal government has become too big. The only 3 letters that our founding fathers ever thought were necessary are USA. We are going to have the oversight. We are going to have the spending fights, and we are going to win. We have truth on our side, and we win by standing on truth, by building rather than destroying, and by, as Scripture says, clinging to what is good. This fight has come to us. We didn't ask for it, but we have the weapons to win. It will require all of us to stand and fight alongside one another. And we must stand united in this battle against actual evil. The spoken word is the most powerful force in the universe. The world was created with words. Why do you think the woke left wants to silence your speech? If you are silent, you remain useless, and you lose by default. God instructs us time and time again in His Word to use it. Psalm 107:20 says God sent His Word and healed them. There's creative power in your words. What would you do if the Lord stood before you today and said, from this moment forward, you will have whatever you say? Well, Scripture has already said that to you. Mark 11:23, we're told to talk to our mountain. We aren't instructed to have our pastors speak to our mountain or have your girlfriend speak to your mountain. We're not supposed to complain about the mountain or hike halfway up it and set up camp on the mountain. You are to speak to that mountain and command it to be removed from your life. We all have these immovable objects in our life, these impossibilities. Sometimes they come in the form as laundry. Right, moms? But speak to those impossibilities. Speak life and truth. And that is exactly what we are doing this week. We are exposing the corruption. We are exposing the lies. In the oversight committee that I serve on, we've already been exposing big tech's collusion with the federal government. Your federal government has been weaponized against you. They have been sent to silence you. They colluded with big tech to censor the Hunter Biden laptop from hell story. And we are going to continue to investigate Hunter Biden, not because he's a bad painter or bad at taking selfies or, feels a little too free in a slip and slide every now and then. We are going to investigate Hunter Biden because he has used his father's positions in government for shady business dealings with Ukraine and China. We no longer need a resident in the White House. We need a president who puts America first and not his business dealings with corrupt foreign countries. I think the man that we need to put back in the White House will be here center stage tonight. It's time we get real leadership back in the White House. Someone who actually cares about you and puts you first. Isn't it disgusting when you can't tell where the FBI ends and where big tech begins? I have called for 230 protections to be removed from these big tech companies who are hiding behind Section 230, and they are acting like editors rather than publishers. This is unacceptable, and you deserve so much more. You know, my friend Congressman Matt Gaetz, he said, great hair. He said, we have issued tens of subpoenas. Well, those are rookie numbers, folks. I think we need to get those numbers up to the hundreds because every federal agency needs to come and speak and testify before Congress about what has been going on. You, the people, deserve to know what your government is up to. You deserve representatives that represent you. You deserve representatives who understand that we work for you, not the other way around. There's so much enthusiasm in this movement. I'm excited to be a part of it. Don't let anyone grow weary in this time. We have just begun winning. We took back the House, and I'm excited about our slim majority because that gave us leverage to actually do something. Leverage to govern as we campaign, rather than looking at that R next to our name and thinking it stands for rollover. For the first time in a long time, Cpac, conservatives are winning. It is our message and our policies that are going to get our country back on track, that are going to get the ATF under control. Who the heck do they think they are right now? Get rid of them. The ATF doesn't make laws. Congress does. There's this thing called separation of powers. And I can't wait to drag them into oversight and remind them of that. But as you leave here, I want you to take everything that you have learned and share that. I want you to shine a light across this nation. America is the greatest country because of the men and women who have sacrificed and given their all for her. I'm tired of these politicians who think that they give you your rights and think that they're better than everyone else, set out to destroy this great country. With record high inflation, 20 million Americans unable to pay their utility bills, sacrificing our energy independence that President Trump gained for us, opening up our southern borders, borders that we must now secure. And that must be a part of every funding debate that we have. Because we aren't going to fund a borderless country, and we are not going to fund tyranny any longer. But as you shine your light, shine it bright in your family. Shine it bright in your community, in your churches, in your schools, in the grocery store. Don't ever let anyone put you in the darkness, hide you out. You are the great American comeback. And together, we are restoring America back to where it belongs. We are taking our children back. We are taking our country back. We are closing our borders. We are making America what we know it to be, a country that is more exceptional than any other because our people are so great. And we are united. Cpac, this is a great week of encouragement. I hope you leave here strengthened and encouraged, built up, and stronger than ever. I love you all, and God bless you. Thank you.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 되어야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
In this room. But the Chinese regime wants to snuff it out. The Communist Party of China is trying to take away our sovereignty and make us a colony. First, COVID-19. This disease leaked from a lab, in all probability. But one thing we know 100%, that China's regime deliberately spread it beyond its borders to America and to the world. And that means every coronavirus death in the United States is a murder. And now we know that in Chinese military labs, they are working on something called, quote, specific ethnic genetic attacks. In other words, attacks caused by pathogens that will leave the Chinese immune, but will kill everybody else. And that's a civilization killer. But we know something else, that China is trying to kill us with more than just disease. There's fentanyl. China's TikTok glorifies drug use in the United States. They are now dyeing fentanyl pills with colors to make it look like candy. In other words, they are marketing death to our children. And we know that they're adding fentanyl to prescription drugs so that Americans have been dying when they think they're taking their medications. Every fentanyl death in the United States is a murder because China's regime has a total surveillance state. They know exactly what these fentanyl gangs are doing,
And we also know that the fentanyl gangs run their money, their proceeds, through the Chinese state banking system. So what do we do? First of all, we sever trade and investment with China. We must cut off the blood supply to those who mean us harm. We must eject China's agents. Hey, Americans, this is our country. We don't have to put up with this. And we must get the Chinese off of our farm and ranch land. We know that the Chinese, with our farmland, they are involved in cultivation of illegal drugs. They are basing human trafficking operations on them. That's in Oklahoma. And of course, they're using them for espionage. This is our land. Why would we ever allow an enemy to occupy our land in our country? And there's one more thing that we must do, and this by far is the most important. We must remember that all Americans have a common enemy that means to destroy our society. And that means we must unite as a country, and we must unite as a people. Yesterday, a woman stopped me in the hall just over there, and she said that last year that her younger sister died from a dose of illegal Chinese fentanyl. We cannot allow the Chinese communists to do that anymore. But I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because I have a story, and this story is mine. My dad arrived in this country on a Liberty ship from China by way of India and Australia. This was just before the end of the Second World War, and he came here to get his engineering degree. 1949, he arrived in 46. 1949, the communists took over China, but a generous America allowed him to stay. So my dad started a small business, a Chinese takeout, of course. He turned it into a successful restaurant. And then he took the proceeds from his restaurant and he bought, in Madison, New Jersey, where he lived, he bought a building. He renovated it and he sparked the rejuvenation of the downtown area. My dad never missed an opportunity to vote. My dad never missed an opportunity to tell my three sisters and me how wonderful his adopted country was. And he would always say that China was his birthplace, but America was his home. So I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because I learned from my dad that not only is America a great country, but that we Americans are good people. So thank you, patriots, for defending the country that my dad loved so much. We are the United States of America, and we must stand united. So let's tell this world, let those bastards in Beijing hear us. USA! 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 America strong, Cpac! America strong! Thank you so much, and God bless.
election deniers.
There's even suspicion of being cued.
Disproven claim.
Litigate this.
No,
I'm
just wondering why they would all lie.
You can make all the xenophobic comments you want.
Bring it on.
예, 좀 전에 고든창 박사가 이야기를 했는데요. 굉장히 중요한 메시지인 것 같습니다. 그러니까 지금 우리 한인들도 이 부분을 심각하게 생각해야 되는데 한국은 우리가 태어난 birthplace이죠. 고향이고. 그런데 지금 우리가 살고 있는 곳, 이곳이 내 나라가 되는 것 아닙니까? 그러니까 미주 한인들, 코리안 아메리칸들을 이야기하자고 하면 그러면은 우리가 진짜 신경 써야 되는 것은 바로 미국의 안위, 그리고 이 나라에 대한 사랑, 이런 것이고요. 다행히도 고든창이 얘기한 것처럼 미국은 훌륭하고 좋은 나라일 뿐만 아니라 미국 사람들이 또 좋은 사람들이라는 것을 우리가 좀 기억을 계속 해야 되겠습니다. 미국의 정신이라는 것, 그 청교도 정신에서 출발해서 지금까지 오아온 미국의 정신이라는 것을 저희가 망가뜨리고 잊어버려서는 안 되겠죠. 계속해서 연설 들으시겠습니다.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, Cpac, I love you so much. This crowd is amazing. Something tells me you're here to see somebody who's coming up a little bit later on, but that's okay. I'm happy you're here right now. I love you too. I love you too. It's just every time I stand on the Cpac stage, I realize what a miracle this all is. I mean, I am standing here as proof that every single American can make a difference in this fight that we're up against. I kind of got into this as a fed-up mom. Maybe you've heard a little bit about my story. I decided to run for office. I was sick of the status quo. I walked away from the fake news and walked away from my career and said, I don't want to do that anymore. Oh boy, best decision I ever made, by the way. Like you and like the people of Arizona, I'd grown sick of the open borders, of the wide open borders, of the cartels running the show, of fentanyl pouring across our border, killing our young people. This isn't drug overdoses that we're seeing. This is a poisoning of our youth. And if you don't think that China and Mexico can bring down an entire civilization with drugs, then you need to study the opium wars, because that's how they did it. And they're trying to kill our young people. But as a mom, I got sick of that. Why weren't our elected officials doing something about it? Why were these politicians more interested in dealing and helping Ukraine than helping their own citizens? And so I stepped into the fray. Boy, I had no idea what was about to happen. I jumped in, I decided to run, and we started a movement. I thought we were alone at first. We started a movement of moms and dads, of grandmas and grandpas, of students. Even the little ones were with us. It was really quite amazing. And we led this movement on the precipice of making Arizona great again. And they knew that that was dangerous. They knew that was dangerous. They couldn't have someone like me in office who's going to shut down the cartels at the border. They were so afraid of me and so afraid of we the people that they stopped us by any means necessary, and they did that on November 8th, on Election Day. Did you all hear about what happened in Arizona? They stole an election in broad daylight, right in front of us. And then they dared us to do something about it. They dared us to do something. Here's what happened. On Election Day, when all of our people were showing up, they printed intentionally the wrong image on the ballot so that you would put your ballot into the tabulator and it would be spit out. 250,000 ballots were rejected on Election Day across Maricopa County. And let me remind you, this was happening in the Republican areas to vote. It was so bad, I told my team, I don't want to vote in a Republican area. I've got to go find the most liberal part of town and vote there, and that's what we did. We drove across town, I voted in the liberal part of town, got in and out, no problem, machines were working, everything was fine. But in over 60% of the polling locations, primarily in all of the Republican areas, they were printing the wrong ballots, the machines weren't working, they were being spit out, and the Republicans in Arizona were disenfranchised. 75% of them voting that day were Republicans. They did this intentionally. And they thought, can you imagine this? They thought that we would roll over and go quietly into the night? No. Yeah, she just said it. She said, no. Hell no. They messed with the wrong mama bear. They messed with the wrong mama bear, and this mama bear is going to tear them to shreds. That they would think they can steal another election. So what we're doing is we have the strongest election lawsuit this country's ever seen, and we just filed it at the Arizona Supreme Court this week. It's great. And we are exposing these criminals who are stealing our elections, and we're exposing them every single day. We want to know who they are, and we want to make sure we drive them out of office. And we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to do that. Now, here's the thing. I don't know what's going to happen with our case. I'm not a justice on the Supreme Court. I hope they do the right thing and apply the law. We have an exceptional case. We have the proof right there. But I'm going to be really honest with you. This is in God's hands. I wish it were in my hands solely, because I would do everything I could, but I'd rather it be in God's hands. And you know what else is in God's hands? Us staying in the game. As President Ronald Reagan once said, when you can't make them see the light, make them feel the heat. And they may think that they won, but I know they're feeling the heat. They're actually, we've got them in the frying pan right now. This is true. And I know, I'm going to tell you why. Now, I can't believe this actually happened, and I wasn't sure if I was going to share it here at Cpac. I wonder if the fake news will even cover this. Something happened to me this week before I left for Cpac, and it shows how desperate these people are to stop me and to silence you. I decided to share this. It's a little bit controversial, but I'm going to put this out. Somebody showed up at my door this week. They called me before and said, I got to talk to you in person. This can't be done over the phone, which is always kind of like, uh-oh, what's that going to be about? They came to my door and they tried to bribe me out of getting out of politics. It's really happened. I'm telling you this because this is how disgusting politics is. A mom who runs for office and they're afraid of me. They tried to bribe me with a job title, with a huge salary, a position on a board. This is how they do it. And I said, are you kidding me? I walked away from a big job and a big salary. I'm not motivated by that stuff, guys. I'm not. So this person standing before me was sent at the request of some powerful people back east. They want me out of politics. But wait a minute. I thought they already stopped us. Why are they so afraid? I thought they already stopped our movement. So, well, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know. I'm just on God's time right now. And when I said no to this person, they didn't take no for an answer. They said, well, what will it take? What is your price? How do we keep you out? Name your price. This really happened this week. Name your price. All we're asking for you to do is to get out of politics for 2 years. Okay, Cpac, I gotta ask you, do you think I should sit out for 2 years? Should we put our movement on ice for 2 years? I didn't think so. Or should we double down and stay in this? Let's double down. Now, I'm gonna be honest, at that very moment, I wanted to sick my dog on him. But I have a pug and it wasn't gonna happen. So I said, you let your handlers back east know that I can't name a price because there is no price that I would sell out my country for. Not $1 million, not $10 million, not $100 million. I love you right back. But I'll tell you, this tells me that they do not want my name on a ballot again. And I have a message. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. And so that got me very fired up. I was packing for Cpac, and this happened, and I'm like, I'm so fired up. And then after this weekend at Cpac has a way of firing up us again, right? So I just want you to know, as we leave here, they may act, and they're gaslighting us, and they may act like they're in control. We, the people, are in control. We are in control. And I have complete faith, and I have complete confidence that this country can and will get things back on track. 100%. Because America First is not over yet. The world is just about to see what great things can happen when we invest in America, when we rebuild America, when we educate America, and when we finally come together as Americans proudly. We can do great things. So I say that we spend, I don't know about you, but I say we spend every single day from here going forward striving to make America great again. And that starts with re-electing President Donald J. Trump. Let's do it. Cpac, I love you. America, I love you. God bless America. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from New York, Chair of the House Republican Conference, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik.
Excited to be here with you today as the conference chair of the new House Republican majority. Thank you, America, for firing Nancy Pelosi once and for all. In just 2 short years under far-left single-party Democrat rule, America has faced crisis after crisis. Inflation has skyrocketed to the highest rate in my lifetime, crushing hardworking families, small businesses, farms, and seniors. Families now have to choose between filling up their gas tanks, heating their homes, or putting food on the table because of Bidenflation and Joe Biden's war on American energy independence. Violent crime is rampant, not just in big cities, but in suburbs and small towns as well, as Democrats continue to push their radical defund the police policies and rhetoric. We've seen Joe Biden has shamefully turned his back on our Border Patrol agents as America faces a border crisis, not just with our southern border, but our northern border wide open as well, with millions of illegals and deadly fentanyl pouring across. Our national debt is more than $31 trillion. Yet Joe Biden and the far-left socialists, they want a blank check to continue to spend our hard-earned taxpayer dollars on wasteful, woke programs. Foreign money from communist China and Russia has flowed to the Biden crime family, while the stenographers in the mainstream media turn a blind eye to it. And America is seeing Joe Biden's corrupt DOJ and FBI fully weaponized as they label parents domestic terrorists, as they conducted an unprecedented and illegal raid on President Trump's home, and illegally paid Twitter $3 million to suppress stories, such as the Hunter Biden laptop story, all for the political benefit and purpose of electing Democrats. Our House Republican majority is the last backstop to save America and the only check on Joe Biden, and we have hit the ground running. On day one, we voted to defund and fire Joe Biden's army of IRS agents. 87,000 IRS agents, you're fired. We reopened the People's House from Nancy Pelosi's authoritarian and unconstitutional regime. We voted to end unconstitutional and destructive COVID-19 mandates. Speaker McCarthy removed corrupt Adam Schiff and the communist Chinese compromised Eric Swalwell from the House Intelligence Committee. And House Republicans made sure that Ilhan Omar can no longer spew her vile anti-Semitism from the Foreign Affairs Committee. We, the American people, and House Republicans will always proudly stand with Israel. House Republicans established the Select Committee on Communist China to expose and combat this grave threat across our country. We launched the Select Subcommittee on the COVID pandemic to continue to dig into what we all knew was the truth 3 years ago, what we were viciously smeared by the mainstream media for saying, and what Fauci lied under oath about, that COVID came from a communist Chinese lab. We are proud to be the party of parents. We introduced the Parents' Bill of Rights to ensure that parents, not radical leftists or Washington bureaucrats, that parents are in the driver's seat when it comes to their child's education. And just this week, we passed my Rein in Inflation Act to hold Joe Biden accountable for his reckless spending and executive orders that have caused prices to skyrocket and inflation to surge. And yes, we established and are hard at work on the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government to take on the deep state, to expose the rampant corruption in Joe Biden's DOJ and FBI, and to protect our fundamental constitutional rights, which have been under attack for far too long from corrupt federal bureaucracies and bureaucrats. This Select Committee is important. It will do some of the most important work in this Congress, because there is a systemic rot and dangerous politicization in the culture and the leadership of not only the FBI, but other agencies, and it needs to be rooted out. Just look at the dangerous and un-American list of abuses. You have Joe Biden's Department of Justice illegally targeting parents as domestic terrorists just because those parents stood up for their kids at school board meetings. You have the FBI unconstitutionally opening Crossfire Hurricane to target and spy on President Trump in an attempt to suppress the will of the American people. You have the faulty FISA application used to illegally spy on President Trump's campaign, which they lied about, and I was proud to help expose on the House Intelligence Committee. And of course, we have the Twitter files and the FBI's illegal suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, shamelessly using millions of taxpayer dollars. I will say that again. We, the American people, unknowingly picked up the tab for the FBI to pay Twitter to interfere in the 2020 election on behalf of Joe Biden. It's un-American, and we will hold them accountable. House Republicans are proud every day that under Chairman Jim Jordan's leadership, this subcommittee has issued more subpoenas than any other committee combined, and we are just getting started. Friends, we the people know that the fabric of America is under attack. It's under attack by the radical left, their loyal stenographers in the mainstream media, and the failed and corrupt leadership of Joe Biden and today's Socialist Democrat Party. We need patriots like you across America to save our great republic. And this will be one of the toughest fights we face. Believe me, I know firsthand that the left, the entire corrupt Democrat ecosystem, and vicious never-Trumpers will smear, threaten, cancel, lie, and do anything to try to silence us and suppress the will of the American people. But the American people are smart. We see past the left's politics of personal destruction. We have exposed the corrupt and complicit mainstream media and we must take our country back in 2024 by re-electing President Donald J. Trump. And while I'm certainly honored to serve as the House Republican Conference Chair, my proudest title is Mom. And as the newest mom in Congress to my 1-year-old Sam, I know that nothing is more important than saving the American dream for the next generation. And I know how important this movement is because of where I come from, my home. I was born and raised in upstate New York and the North Country, where we are proudly America first. We are the cradle of the American Revolution, where almost 250 years ago, brave patriots fought in the battles of Saratoga to turn the tide of the Revolutionary War. It's where 43 years ago, some of you may remember this or may have watched it live on TV at the Olympics in Lake Placid, a team of American amateur hockey players out-hustled, out-skated, and defeated the communist Soviet Union, stunning the world and giving us the unforgettable Miracle on Ice. And today, we are the proud home of Fort Drum and the historic 10th Mountain Division, one of the most deployed units in the U.S. Army since 9/11. And to the people of my district in upstate New York, I am so humbled and grateful each and every day to represent you and your families. We unabashedly love America in upstate New York. We must work together to save America, and we must win, and we will win. Thank you very much, great patriots, for being here. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
America, the great.
죄송합니다. 목소리가 안 나가고 있었네요. 예, 지금 이제 좀 전에 들으셨던 게 앨리스 스테파닉 공화당 하원 의장이고요. 공화당 하원 의장 스테파닉이 한 이야기는 지금 2024년에 트럼프 대통령이 대통령으로 당선되게 할 것이다, 이렇게 이야기를 합니다. 결국에는 트럼프 전 대통령에 대한 지지 선언을 한 셈이다, 이렇게 이해할 수 있는 상황이고요. 스테파닉 자신이 트럼프 전 대통령의 지지를 받아서 사실은 이제 누굽니까? 리츠 체니 자리를 몰아내고 그 자리에 들어갈 수 있었기 때문에 결국은 이제 하원이 지금 공화당이 다수당이 된 것을 기념하면서 동시에 본인을 지지해 주었던 트럼프에 대해서 다시 지지해 주는 그런 모습을 보이는, 이것은 뭐 도리를 하는 것 같은 그런 분위기이긴 합니다. 어쨌든 지금까지 시리즈로 다 캐리 레이크 후보 같은 경우에는 깜짝 출연을 했습니다. 원래 일정표에 없었거든요. 일정표에 없었는데 깜짝 출연을 해서 저도 깜짝 놀랐고요. 지금 애리조나주의 선거 문제에 대해서 이야기를 했는데 계속해서 싸우겠다라는 강한 의지를 보여줬고요. 여기 지금 모여있는 마가 유권자들, 청중들도 계속해서 좀 레이크 후보를 응원하는 그런 모습을 좀 보여주었습니다. 이제 계속해서 저희가 보게 될 연사들은요, 이제 존 솔로몬이라고 리얼 아메리칸 뉴스의 진행자인데, 존 솔로몬하고 그다음에 댄 비숍, 노스캐롤라이나주의 하원 의원이 댄 비숍하고요, 조지아주의 하원 의원이 마이크 콜린스, 마이크 콜린스 하원 의원 이렇게 나와서 지금 Death of Surrender Caucus라는 지금 이제 의회에서 돌아가고 있는 이야기를 좀 들려줄 것으로 예상이 됩니다. 그 다음에는 릭 그레넬 전 국가정보원장이죠, 정보국장, 전 국가정보국장인 릭 그레넬이 나와서 이제 인터뷰를 하게 되는데 아무래도 이제 국가안보 문제에 대한 이야기들이 나올 것 같고요. 그 다음에는 Education for Dummies라고 그랬어요. 일종 이제 풀뿌리 운동에 대한 이야기가 좀 있을 것 같고요. 지금 이제 좌경화된 사상들을 갖다가 미국 국민들에게, 특히 어린아이들에게 강요하고 있는 이러한 그 미국의 현실에 대한 비판, 이런 것도 좀 있을 것 같습니다. 계속해서 지금 저희가 소식을 전해드리도록 하겠습니다. 오늘이 마지막 날이고요. 6시, 그러니까 5시 25분 혹은 5시 반 사이에 트럼프 전 대통령의 연설이 시작될 예정입니다. 이게 일정이 계속 바뀌기 때문에 장담은 못하겠습니다. 계속해서 Cpac 강연 보시겠습니다.
From North Carolina, Congressman Dan Bishop. From Georgia, Congressman Mike Collins. And your moderator, CEO and editor-in-chief of Just the News, John Solomon.
Thank you, guys. All right. Hello, Cpac. Good to be here. We have a couple of soldiers on the front line of changing this town. This is going to be a fun conversation. We've been talking about the weaponization of government, the bloating of government for a long time. We now have a troop of leaders in Congress ready to make those changes. We're going to dive into that today. Congressman Dan Bishop, you've been here a long time. You've seen how this city has grown. You've seen how agencies have been turned against the American people. You're on, I think, one of the most consequential committees that we have right now, the Weaponization Subcommittee. Tell us what you're finding, what troubles you, how we fix it.
John, it's the focus of my service in Congress this term is the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government led by Jim Jordan under the Judiciary Committee, also led by Jim. And I can tell you that we're digging in. We're having a hearing this week on some of the revelations we've seen from the Twitter files. Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger will be there. And you know, what we see is over and over and over American federal government agencies have begun to act in ways that are incomprehensible, that do not respect the right relationship between people and the government. So what we've seen, I think, is aptly described as the largest censorship operation in U.S. government history, among other things, and it is time for it to stop. And the way it stops is for us to dig into it and expose every single part of it. And that's what we're going to do.
Let me just follow up real quickly, sir. You know, there's been a spin job. Well, the federal agencies really weren't pressuring social media to shut things down. You don't believe that, do you?
Pressuring, I mean, they were embedded with them.
That's right.
So you had meetings every quarter, and then every month, and then every week. FBI agents from the CIA, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and then, of course, it extended in the public health sphere as well. And they are curating and managing the public conversation of the American people. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that is not the role of the federal government.
Absolutely. Amen. You are so right. Congressman Collins, I had the pleasure of chronicling your campaign last year. You were kind enough to come on our show a lot. You're new to the town, but I know you're as determined as anyone here to get things done. You ran a company. You ran a very successful trucking company. You needed competence in your company every day. It doesn't seem like competence is a requirement of the federal government anymore. You have a very important focus on our Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. Does he belong in the job?
No, he doesn't. As a matter of fact, we're requesting that he resign immediately.
Right.
You know, John, coming from the private sector and running a business, I hire people based on their skills, what they can do and how they can advance our company. But what we have here is an agency that has literally hired someone based on identity politics. You don't have to look any further. You can go back to even NOTAM. They were more focused on changing that acronym from Notice to Airmen to Notice to Air Missions. A 176-page rule, thousands of dollars to change that acronym. Did it make it any safer? No. It was just more cultural advances and social agenda politics. You follow that all the way up through this latest that happened over in East Palestine, where they blamed it on wheel bearings going hot. Well, if you look at Norfolk Southern's ESG report from late 2022, you'll see where the CEO states that it is utmost importance that they advance their DEI and cultivation of culture in their company. Instead of saying something like, hey, we need to hire the best mechanics, we're going to grease the fourth rail, or the rail over here, the fourth branch of government, instead of hiring people to grease those wheel bearings. That's what's happening to these agencies. And you've got to cut the head off at the top, and it's time for Pete Buttigieg to go. It's time to hire somebody with competence up there that understands how to run the transportation department.
Yeah, that'd be a welcome to a lot of people, I think. Congressman Bishop, I did a lot to work on the Russia collusion narrative. There were many great members of Congress that dug in, and we got the truth out. It took us 3 years, but an FBI agent at the very beginning, when I started my journey, said, if no one gets held responsible, if there isn't a true consequence, the temptation to do this will double in the years ahead. How do we start to get accountability to those federal bureaucrats that actually cheat at their jobs?
It's exactly the question to ask, John. And I'll tell you, we've seen it over time. There was the church committee in the mid-'70s, dug in, discovered a lot of abuses that were going on in covert foreign operations as well as domestic intelligence. Attorney General guidelines resulted. They have a lot of guidelines governing undercover operations, confidential human source use, and they violate them over and over again. The FISA applications on Carter Page, we saw the FISA court said the FBI demonstrates a culture of lack of candor. It's got to change, and all of the reforms that have been attempted haven't changed it. I'll tell you what I think is really honestly true. These agencies are too large. They are too well funded. They need to be gutted, seriously reduced, and reformed. The FBI, above all. And I think they've got to be more imbued into the heartland of America. I think the problem with the FBI in particular, its decision-making has been centralized, and you have a handful of executives, well, more than a handful, I'm sorry to say, but a lot of people in Washington making terrible decisions, more and more politicized all the time. They've got to be run out. That's all there is to it. You've got to reduce their funding.
Yeah, we do.
And if I could chime in on that, you know, as Congressman Bishop and I were talking in the back, there's a bill out there right now to get rid of the Department of Education. It is time to get rid of that department.
I'm a co-sponsor, and so are you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How about that?
Yes, sir. You know, we've passed a lot of bills over to the Senate, and they're sitting there. I have no idea what they're doing over there. Maybe they're learning to play pickleball. I'm not sure. But there is one thing that we can do, and what the Congress is doing, and that is we are holding oversight in every committee, and that's good. But the other good thing about that is we're not just sitting in four walls up here in Washington, D.C. as we hold oversight. We're taking these oversight hearings out across America. And when you do that, local media will pick that up. Because as you well know, media is stymieing and squashing a lot of what is going on in D.C. But if we can get that out into rural America, and as local news media picks it up, then your bigger news media picks it up, and finally your national media will have to pick it up. We'll expose what's been going on up here, because after 10 years of just omnibus bills, where you just package stuff up and throw it to agencies and say, spend it at will, by God, it's time to find out what's been going on in this place up here.
I think that's right.
I agree with you.
You know, John and
Yes, sir.
Mike, I would add to that, one of the things that I think we've seen is we've sort of been willing to drift. It's a question of will. I was one of the 20 who in January believed we needed to have some discussion and reach some agreement on some important things before we elected the speaker.
You held out.
And it's just a question of whether we're going to exercise the will. I don't know how many times over the course of years I've seen, and every time there's a showdown over a budget issue, Democrats have seemed to have won. And I think it's just Republicans have to finally say, no, you're not going to win every time. We've got important things to accomplish for the American people. You've screwed up just about everything you've touched. We are going to change some things, and it starts now.
Amen. And you know what's so great about that?
What's that?
Almost 70% of the makeup of the Republican caucus right now in the House are America First agenda people.
That's right.
It's a great caucus. It's a time that we can really band together, get things done, and we will get that done. So.
Such important stuff. January 6th, another area where accountability. I think we got to get those videotapes first, though, don't you think? Get those videotapes, then we will know something about what happened. Gentlemen, I want to ask this. When I was growing up, my dad used to have me watch all those John Wayne movies, and there was always that tragic scene where you hear the sound of retreat. Every time I hear the Republicans in the Senate, at least their leadership, it sounds like they're sounding the retreat. I hear from the Senate side, we're going to have to wait to 2025 to get anything done. I know both of you gentlemen, you're not waiting to 2025. What can the power of the purse do now to start to shrink this government, drain this swamp?
Look, Republicans are going to be together. We're going to have 218 in support of a debt ceiling package coming up that is going to set priorities in the right direction. And the senators are going to want to skip all that and just go on with the old way of doing business. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. We are not going to permit that to happen. The change begins right now. This Congress, not when we have both chambers, not when we have both chambers in the presidency, now. And we can. We set the right priorities and go to the mat for it, we can prevail.
Are you?
And not only that, John, we haven't passed budgets, we haven't passed appropriation bills up here in years.
Insane.
What is it? It's been 50 years since we passed all the appropriation bills within the designated time. That doesn't make sense. I'm a small businessman, but God, I can make better sense than that. But we need to start passing our budgets. We need to pass our appropriation bills. Get those over to the Senate. The debt ceiling, yeah, it's got to be dealt with, but it's not going to be a clean debt ceiling. We got to have some cuts. $31 trillion in debt and counting. That's right. And then we'll start moving this needle in the right direction. The other thing that it'll do is set up for the next 2 years' election. And I think with the American people is they are waking up, and by God, they're waking up every day.
They are.
You don't have to go any further than the nearest gas station to wake up to see what inflation and what's going on in this country and how wasteful spending has just created the dollar to where it's worthless now with the giveaway programs. So people are waking up. We've got, and I think the next cycle of elections is going to be incredible.
I know you two have just 435, but if it gets to, because I've seen this game play out, they run the clock to the end and say, we have a crisis. Are you willing to sit there and say, well, shut down the government if we don't get what the American people deserve?
Absolutely.
You are?
No doubt about it.
No doubt.
There you go. That's an important point. You got to hold your guns. I want to wrap up here. A lot of times we look around and we think Washington and the rest of the world are disconnected, the rest of this country, and they call us flyover country everywhere else. But at the end of the day, the American people can do a lot to support what you need to do. They've got to back you in the trenches in what is really an epic fight for the future of this country. I want to ask both of you this question. I'll start with you as the newest member of Congress here. What can these folks right here, out here, do to keep your back safe so that you can get the job done that they need?
We need help on the Senate side. It's as simple as that. You could contact the Senate over there and make sure they understand that you know that bills are being sent over there and nothing's being done. We can send bills over there every day, but if they don't take them up and vote them up or down, whatever they want to do with them, then we're over here just handling oversight. And don't get me wrong, oversight's good.
Yep.
But that's one thing that we could really use the help on.
Okay. Congressman Bishop?
My observation, John, has been that the people, especially folks like the people in this room, are way ahead of Congress. I think they know what needs to be done. They realize that we've got to be prepared to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. There's been a lot of cosmetic stuff. They know that we as Republicans need to hold each other accountable in Washington. They know that some of the problems have been in the Republican Party, and they expect change. Here's one thing I'd say. Sometimes there's a sentiment out there I'm ready to give up because I think the elections are crooked and so forth. Do not give up. Make changes in Congress. Be in touch with your senator. Mike is right. Be in touch with your own House member when they screw up. Be in touch with me if I screw up. You hold us accountable. Tell us to hold each other accountable. And you will help us set this country back on the right track.
Amen.
The American people have the capacity to fix anything at all, including this woke and weaponized government. We're going to get about it. I guarantee it. That's what I'm going to work on every day.
Turns out Congress isn't as broken as we thought. We have two real leaders here. Gentlemen, it's been an honor to have with you. Yes,
John, I cannot get up without saying one other thing, and that gentleman was exactly right. Now, Speaker McCarthy released all those thousands of hours of tapes. But y'all, we have got to stand up. We got to demand justice for those political prisoners from January 6th.
Absolutely right, sir. We can't have an unequal justice system. We cannot.
Nope.
Well, gentlemen, it's been an absolute honor. I know all these folks out here appreciate that you're on the front lines. You're really fighting for them. Great honor. We're going to have a rest of the Cpac. Get a lot more conversation.
Thank you, John.
God
Thank
bless
you
you,
for the
sir.
great work you
Thank
do.
you. It's a great honor to be with you.
Good to see y'all.
Take care, guys.
Oil, the most precious natural resource known to man. It is the engine that drives every modern economy and has provided the foundation for innovation worldwide. From powering our cities and fueling our vehicles to the more than 6,000 products created from one barrel. Oil has changed the standard of living for every human being in the modern world. Just like the rising sun in the morning, oil has become a part of our everyday lives. There is not one facet of our lives that is not touched by oil or the products created from it. When you think about it, it's pretty simple. We are all in the oil business, whether we want to be or not. Every one of us pay for it every day. Let me ask you this. If you're going to be in the oil business anyway and pay these prices, doesn't it make sense to try to learn how to make some money while doing it? At Panex, we are producers of American oil. Go to panex.us/learn, where you can begin to build your foundational knowledge about the oil and natural gas industry. A perfect place to start would be a morning without oil. This 5-minute video reveals a world that most of us don't even contemplate as possible, a world without oil in it. From there, you can bolster your oil knowledge by downloading one of our oil and gas primers, Oil and Gas 101 or 102. At Panex, we believe it is imperative to educate yourself on all that oil can do for you. Do yourself a favor and give us that chance. When done, if you decide that you too would like to reap the rewards of oil and gas, great. If not, at least you've bolstered yourself with that information that will last you a lifetime. You owe it to yourself. Go to panex.us/learn and see all that oil can do for you.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 되어야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
You have a little cheering section.
I think it's more than little, right? Come on.
Seems like a lot of enthusiasm over on that side of the room for you. So it was kind when they announced me that they said I was co-host of Showtime Suspicious.
I noticed that.
Yes, which I am, and proud to be. I have a lot of my colleagues from the circus are here. I'm also, because just to share with everyone, I was also Hillary Clinton's communications director in 2016.
Hey.
I mean, I thought, well, we'll get to that. And Barack Obama, White House communications director for Barack Obama too. So I'm just gonna do the whole thing.
I asked her to do this.
Bill Clinton, I worked for Bill Clinton as well. Just yeah. Oh, I thought he might do better. Okay. But the theme of this discussion is you don't learn a lot only talking to people you agree with, right? Thank you. And so Rick and I have a good mutual friend, and he said, wouldn't it be interesting if you and I had a conversation from different sides of the aisle and showed that you can I don't even really think debate is necessarily productive these days so much as what's interesting for me and interviewing Republicans, particularly on the circus, is just to understand, we may not agree on things, but I want to know where your beliefs are coming from, what's underneath it all, right? And I think that is the beginning of a way to start to understand each other.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. Thank you. Thanks for asking me. Thanks. So you worked for 8 years for President George W. Bush. You were the spokesperson for the U.S. at the United Nations. So I don't know if you would call yourself at that time part of sort of the neocon, but you were part of certainly the foreign policy establishment in Republican circles. And so I had an awareness of you, right? And then on the Clinton campaign, and during the primaries in 2016, you've been critical of President Trump, like during the primaries. And I remember the Clinton campaign, when we heard that you had joined the Trump campaign, thinking like, wow, Rick Grinnell, he was, he's just like foreign policy establishment for the Republicans. What was that about for you, making that jump to
So
Trump?
what I would say is I was never a part of the foreign policy establishment, even though I might have had a job.
You had a job in the establishment.
Well, here's the thing is I've worked at the State Department for 12 years. I had worked at the State Department. I've always been the guy that thinks that the President of the United States needs to have a strong Pentagon and a strong State Department. So I joined the State Department. I've been the guy that's been pushing for diplomacy, pushing for alternatives to war. I was up at the UN, and I think that during those days, we did a really good job of galvanizing the world to come together for the beginnings of the Iraq War. I think the problem that we saw is that there was faulty intelligence. And the more I worked in government, the more I realized that government really makes mistakes, and there's a whole group of people that won't admit that government makes mistakes. And so if you go back and you see the faulty intelligence of the Iraq War, we should have admitted it a long time ago. We should have said we built this Iraq War on faulty intelligence. And that, to me, the lack of the foreign policy establishment admitting that really was a problem. When I was acting DNI, we had the foreign policy establishment and the intelligence community say if you moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, you would create World War III. Not only were they wrong about that intelligence, but actually Donald Trump created peace by having the Abraham Accords, the peace accords. And that's literally the opposite. Think about that. It's literally the opposite of what the intelligence community told us.
The intelligence prior to the war in Ukraine said that that Russia would overrun.
So that's a great point. And so this is what I would say is for 1 month straight, the intelligence from Joe Biden said there is a war in Ukraine coming. The Russians are coming into Ukraine.
Well, that was right.
For 1 month. It was totally right.
Yeah.
Here's my problem. We didn't do anything to stop it.
Well, that's
we literally, no. Anthony Blinken never went to Kiev. He has his own plane, Jen. He can get on his own plane and he could fly to any capital in Europe and try to do some sort of a peace accord. What my problem was is that he absolutely told us 100% sure the Russians are coming, and his only policy was to tell Zelensky, we'll give you a ride out and get out of the way of the Russians.
I mean, that's not true. I mean, they did participate in efforts with the French on the front end, but
no, there was no.
But the Russians were wrong about what the United States reaction was going to be and what the West's reaction was going to be.
Look, the Russians
the intelligence on their side was not right either.
Yeah, the Russians, I think, we always have to be skeptical of the Russians. There's no question about that. And look, I would say this. What the Senate Democrats don't like to admit is that they came in and they valued consensus with the Europeans, right? So I stood up to Merkel constantly saying, you shouldn't have this Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It's a bad idea. And what they said back to me was, you don't understand, we can have the pipeline and be okay with the Russians. We in the Trump administration put sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Senate Democrats dropped those sanctions as soon as they came in order to please Merkel. And then, to me, that was a huge signal to Putin that he should go back to what he did in the Obama days of grabbing Crimea when Obama and Merkel looked the other way, and he started back in with a war in Ukraine. I believe that Senate Democrats encouraged this behavior.
But Putin was wrong about how the U.S. was going to respond and how the West was going to respond. I mean, in the end, it's not what happened, right? In the end.
But in the end, I think we have to be able to admit that why didn't Putin invade under Trump?
Yeah, that I don't know. I have a theory.
What's your theory?
I have a theory that President Putin supported President Trump and didn't want to do anything that would. I've been waiting for the booze.
So here's what I'll. No. Let's talk about. Let's do this with facts.
And I didn't want to do anything that would endanger President Trump's presidency.
Let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation.
That's what I think.
Look, hey, we can't hear you anyway, so hang on.
Okay.
I can handle this.
Okay. Don't worry. Don't worry, everyone. You're in good hands with Rick. That's just what I think.
No, I want you to say that again. I want to give you time to have that theory.
Oh boy. Okay. I said I think that President Putin supported President Trump would not want to have endangered his presidency.
Didn't want to endanger the presidency. Okay. So here is.
And I don't know what President Putin thought about what the U.S.'s reaction was going to be this time. He might have thought, but he was wrong.
Right.
What should we do with it now?
So this is what I would say to that, is that I believe that the evidence was clear that we in the Trump administration were very tough on Russia. What we had was, with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, we saw the intelligence that it was coming close to coming up, and we didn't want it to come up. We didn't want that to be operational. And so our sanctions on that pipeline, I wish people would realize, were the right thing to do. And so when you dropped the sanctions on that, I think then you have to take the mantle of being weak on Russia, because you're the ones who dropped those sanctions.
Okay.
Senate Democrats.
Senate Democrats, not me. Okay.
Not you.
But it's not where we've ended up, is it? Right? The U.S. is not weak on Russia across the board.
Yeah,
but what do you think about? You told me if I go off on a tangent, stop me. And so now Nord Stream is starting to become a tangent. So, what about Ukraine now? Here, some speakers have stood on the stage and said things in support of U.S. involvement with Ukraine. A lot of speakers have stood on the stage and said that they think that the U.S. is too involved, that we should stop funding efforts there.
Here's my
Senate
position.
Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who I think is still a Republican, he said it was the most important thing in the world today is just for Ukraine to stop Russia, and there needs to be bipartisan. What do you think?
So here's my position, is that the President of the United States needs all the tools of the U.S. government. So I'm all for having a very strong military. I want to make sure we're always prepared. But as a diplomat, when I'm sitting across the table and trying to do a peace agreement, it's incredibly important that there's a Pentagon behind me, right, that says if we fail, I got to transfer this over to the Pentagon, and they don't negotiate. And so I am very critical of Anthony Blinken. And I don't believe that Joe Biden thinks that he's a very good Secretary of State, because Joe Biden has never allowed him to come forward with a peace plan. We have the Chinese.
Think it's too soon. I mean, the Biden.
Too soon.
There's
It's been
an
a
answer
year.
to that. The Biden team says that. I mean, I know China came forward with
a decent one. It's a good one to start with. It's not perfect.
So the Biden administration thinks that that it was so laughably bad from the Ukrainians' perspective as to be a ruse.
But Zelensky said Biden was wrong. Zelensky said, wow, the Chinese believe in territorial integrity for Ukraine? That's more than Merkel and Obama.
But he has his own interests, right? So what do you think?
He immediately complimented and wanted to do it.
Think you would go to the negotiating table?
I would have gone a year ago to the negotiating table.
And to lift up, that's very different. I mean, do you?
But to try, Jen. You got to try. Do you know that Tony Blinken?
Is that a year ago you would have been doing that from a position of weakness?
No way. No way. I think a year ago, when you have intelligence saying the Russians are coming, there's a war coming, it's immoral to not offer a peace plan.
But I'm now interested in taking this to a higher level, right, about U.S. role in the world, okay? Because that is, what you're deciding is, it is, not worth at this point, it is more, the most important thing is to get to an agreement and this.
Safety of human life. So this
Ukrainians
is
wanna keep
so
fighting,
this
but
is
like, but it does go to, I think, a larger question about what's the U.S. What do you see as the U.S. role in the world? You know, it's like during the Bush administration, it was we are going to it was an objective to spread democracy in the world.
export, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say,
you know, and do you think that, or is it, you know, what do you see as the U.S. role in the world? Because I think that does, and Ukraine's an example of that. But what's interesting for me to hear is you know, after spending your whole career in this,
yeah. So
how do you look at
I reject the idea that somehow you're either pro-war or weak.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. So I think you have to have a strong Pentagon, and you have to have diplomats who are tough.
Right.
We've seen too many times Democrats mock tough diplomats from the Republican side. They don't like, they want the State Department to be, you know, about wine and cheese. They don't want tough diplomats. They just did culinary diplomacy. So here's what I would say.
So you enjoy a good meal? I feel like that could be helpful.
When Anthony Blinken says that all good negotiations start with food,
okay.
I would say no, they start with a really good, strong pro-America policy and a messenger that knows how to drive it home.
Beating up on poor Tony a lot. What do you think? But what do you think about that bigger question, like what the U.S. role? I mean, I am very interested in this.
So I think that we can articulate as people who want to put America first. At least I can.
Yeah,
I can
what does that mean?
articulate when you put America first.
Yeah.
You tell the world that capitalism is a good thing. You respect human rights. You always come down on the rule of law. And to have a superpower like America that puts itself first, we have to be unabashedly telling the world, you will benefit when America puts itself first because we have a rules-based system.
And how do you think that differs from what President Biden is doing?
I think the opposite of America first is consensus with the Europeans.
With our friends when we can, on our own when we must. That's what they
Well,
say.
you said, what does that mean for the world? And what I would say is when you don't put America first, then when Chancellor Merkel comes to you and says, drop the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2
oh my
pipeline,
God, back to the Nord Stream pipeline,
you do that. And I think that you should have kept the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You wouldn't have had the war in Ukraine. That's putting America first. But the Europeans and Merkel came and begged and said, do you want to have nicer relations with us? Drop the sanctions.
And what do you think is more important, for the U.S. should the U.S. be promoting democracy, or should the U.S., is that a goal?
I think we absolutely stand for democracy, and we support it wherever we find it. But I think exporting this on people who are not ready or not willing can be a waste.
When you... Okay, we're just about out of time, but when you look back at your career, and I think that, I mean, I know enough about you, and I am old enough to remember you know, when you were a young aide and when the Republicans took over the Congress for the first time in many years in, you know, 1995. Like, you've been at this for a long time. I was working for President Clinton at the time. I mean, I remember you from that time. Do you feel like there were times, are you like, we were operating on the wrong principles before? Have you always been sort of a provocateur, never part of the establishment? Or do you, and therefore your views have changed? Or is this just an evolution for you of like what's needed for America now?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And what I would say is the more you work inside government, the more you see that it's not perfect, and we need to be honest about that.
Yeah.
If we're going to be a great country, we have to be transparent about our failures. We are a great country because we constantly try to improve, and I would say that the weaponization of government right now is a huge problem.
Yeah, I see it. I agree with that statement. I see the weaponization happening in a different way, but.
Yeah.
But I feel like we had a good discussion, right, people? Okay.
Thank you again for doing
Yeah, I was very happy to do this. And I would be remiss as a Democrat on stage, just say a couple of, thinking of a couple of people who are going through some hard times right now, President Carter and his family, Senator John Fetterman and his family. I know that your mom is, Rick's mother is battling cancer too. And just want to say we're thinking of I'm thinking of all of them.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Which way do we go out?
요즘 건물 사야 된다던데? 커머셜 전문 브로커 누가 좋지?
안드라스 부동산이지. 미국 모든 주에서 매매가 가능하다고. 쇼핑몰, 리테일, 오피스 빌딩, 호텔, 웨어하우스.
누구라고?
유튜브에 안드라스 윤 쳐봐.
이제는 철저히 준비된 전문성만이 수익성을 창출하는 시대입니다. 저 안드라스, 투자에 대한 답을 드리겠습니다.
안드라스 커머셜.com에 더 많은 정보가 있습니다. 안드라스 부동산 770-802-0688.
탈모 샴푸. 머릿결은 포기해야 되나?
더나 플러스 모르나?
66가지 자연 유래 성분과 영양 성분으로 힘있는 모발에 세정력, 머릿결, 두피 건강까지 빠짐없이 다 잡았다. 자연을 담은 탈모 샴푸 더나 플러스.
더나 플러스 탈모 샴푸 미주 출시 기념 특별 세일. 500ml 샴푸 2통과 앰플까지 89불. 가까운 판매처에서 만나세요.
잊지마! 공석 탈모엔 더 나나나.
우리 한인들의 정체는 무엇입니까? 우리가 자손들과 살아갈 땅임에도 불구하고 언젠가는 떠날 방문객처럼 살지는 않습니까?
우리는 이방인이 아닌 이 땅의 주인이 되어야 합니다.
우리는 반드시 이 나라에서 좋은 평판을 만들어야 되는데 이 나라와 우리 이웃과 우리 지역에서 도움이 되는 사람들로 부각이 되어야 됩니다.
좋은 이웃되기 운동이 여러분 곁에서 함께합니다.
Mission has nothing to do with cell phones. Our mission is to relentlessly defend our God-given constitutional rights and freedoms and to do so in a way that glorifies our God.
Bringing God back into public schools. These In God We Trust signs are popping up in classrooms across Texas. Our next guest is with Patriot Mobile, the Texas-based cell phone company that gave the signs currently on display. Here with more is the Vice President of Public Affairs, Lee Wamgans.
And, you know, Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Well, of course, we have, you know, extreme liberal leftists whose, you know, heads explode when they hear the national motto. But by and large, the majority of our feedback has been incredibly positive, and we're so proud to be a part of sharing the American heritage with our students. We love America's schools, and we love our students, and we want to help them and encourage them in any way that we can.
Ladies and gentlemen, up next, Education for Dummies. Please welcome Dean of Liberty Business School and former Virginia Congressman Dave Bratt. From Tennessee, Congresswoman Diana Harshbarger. And your moderator, host of the Jason Rantz Show, Jason Rantz.
Everyone. Quick question before we get started. If you're going to a doctor, would you prefer that they took the MCAT at some point? Probably. Congresswoman, we're at a point, unfortunately, where some schools are saying no more LSATs, no more SATs, ACTs. You're a pharmacist. You had to take, what was it, the MCAT? So, or the PCAT? So where do we start when we're already so far into the madness?
Well, you go back and do
what we did when I was going to school. You know, you make the grades, you make the cut. You're the one that gets into school. You're not entitled just because of your color or your race or what have you. You know, look at the criteria that got me where I was. I mean, listen, I was the first one in my family to graduate from high school and college and then go on and get a doctorate of pharmacy. And let me also tell you this, I paid every penny of my student loans back, by the way. And you know what, it made me a better person. And giving people something for nothing, there's no value in that.
Yeah.
So make the grades, go back to the old way of doing things. You know, the colleges and universities, no ACTs, SATs. How do you get qualified people? You're right. I wanted the doctor that made an A, okay? And now you can't even ask that. Can't ask their qualifications.
You're not supposed to. And Dean, I mean, let's talk about the equity argument. There are folks who will say the demographic of our school is not reflective of the community that we teach in. Is that important? Should it look like the community?
To answer the question, the Congressman, where do I go? I go to God. And I go to God to answer that question about the value of every single person on this planet. Every kid, every student, every scholar is made in the image of God, with the mind of God, in the image of God. And we treat everybody that way. There's never been a problem. The problem started in the 1960s. As soon as we got God out of the schools, then the problems kicked in. And we did this creative language. There's a guy you may have heard of. His name is John Harvard. He was trained in Oxford by a Christian minister. Went to Harvard. He founded Harvard. Harvard's motto was truth for Christ and church. Yeah. That tradition has been with us since the rabbinic tradition, right? The Judeo-Christian West for 3,000 years. Mm-hmm. And so when we get in a bind, that's where I go. When things make no sense, you go to the Judeo-Christian tradition, which started Harvard and Princeton and gave us James Madison, who studied under another minister, Witherspoon. He wrote the Constitution. We've got a great track record. And so we shouldn't be apologetic. We need to learn the terms of this debate and win it on our own terms.
Well, one of the terms has to do with institutionalized racism or institutionalized bigotry of some kind, which is why that there's a disproportionate number of African Americans or Latinos or transgender folks who go to school. Do you believe in a sort of institutionalized or systemic ism at all that's keeping folks out?
No. Anytime you've got an ism, it sounds like a disease state to me. So, you know,
that's why I went to the pharmacy.
Yeah, exactly. I've got the cure, if you want to know. And, you know, we look at higher education, the way it's changed over the years. Honestly, I was on Education and Labor last term, and I'm telling you, we've created a system that is only indoctrinating, you know, and it has been for decades. Just like you said, it may have started back in the 60s. They figured out they could take that race component in the 70s, and they've run with that ever since. And it's not based on your knowledge or, you know, it used to be the great equalizer, Jason. Education did. Yeah. And it's not anymore. And
what is it? What is it now? How would you describe it?
Well, look at it's unaffordable for one thing. You know, and I look at institutions like Harvard and some of these Ivy League schools that they have more money than some GDPs of small countries in their endowments. And I'm like, well, if you want to indoctrinate them, pay for it, you know? And I think Harvard's doing that now. But look, everybody should be afforded an education if they want it. There's restructuring that has to be done. You know, when they indoctrinate our children, we don't know. The sickest I ever was, and parents and grandparents will sympathize with me, is when I sent my son to college, because I knew the values I taught him when he was being raised. But when you get there, they have an agenda. They have an agenda to indoctrinate your children to thinking a whole different way. And how do you change the nation? You change the youth of a nation. You can either bring them up or you can tear it down, and that's exactly where we're at. And we have to change that.
Dean, is that where the motivation lies with a lot of these schools, where the goal is we get them early, they go into society, and they then impose, you know, the worldview of the radical left?
Yeah, no, this is just the Marxism, as the Congresswoman just said. It goes back to Carl and 1860 and all that. But they've gotten very sophisticated, And it started with just a simple class war, but now they've invented more buckets for the fight.
Well, DEI, isn't that a great diversity, equity, inclusion?
It's amazing.
At the beginning, when we didn't actually know what those terms meant to folks on the left, we were like, of course I support diversity or equity. I want to be included, but that's not actually what they mean.
No. And I think it's important for conservatives. We're kind of fighting on two fronts. One is the political front against this stuff. And